Oh, let's fix the camera here. What's going on? Hey everyone, Normal American Show, Rob Noor. Hope everyone's going great. I'm doing good. Look at this. Look at the usual suspects in the chat already. My brother says, Pro won't see me for a few days. Yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Well, here I am. You can troll me, I don't mind. When am I prepping Andrew for his debate with Destiny? I don't know. Whenever he reaches out to me. Maybe we'll do a debate where I'll be Destiny. Who knows? DEI strikes again. Yeah, what a day, right? Got to hear most of the congressional testimony from the U.S. Secret Service head Cheadle, and it was a doozy. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Democrats destroying democracy and the absurdity of the arguments you now hear coming out of the Democratic side. And who knows? Anything else that people want to talk about. Nothing will happen. Yeah, that's our motto, right? Nothing will happen. Where's Joe? We can talk about where Joe's at as well. Mr. Biden, where's he at? It's a good question. But more importantly than any of that stuff, I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. I had a day. It was alright. I can't complain. Got to watch Silence of the Lambs again today, so kind of. I was cleaning, but it was on in the background. Solid movie. Creepy. Other than that, pretty uneventful for me. Which, my goodness, the way this the news cycle's been going, I feel like if you don't pay attention to the news for 20 minutes, next thing you know, some world-changing event occurred. Oh, look at this. My overlay is screwed up here. Let's fix this. No? No go? Okay. I don't know what the problem with that is. Yeah, I heard he called into Kamala's rally. Oh, yeah. It's good stuff. So, we'll start wherever people want. Where do people want to start tonight? With the Secret Service lady, Cheadle? Alright, TLDR. If you didn't watch... Here's what happened, if you didn't watch. The same thing that always happens, except this time, some of the Democrats pretended to be on the same side as the Republicans. But you get someone that gets up that's from an agency that did something wrong, and they're going to be evasive and say they can't answer anything because there's an ongoing investigation, but then they'll selectively answer things that seems to benefit them or benefit their narrative. And there seems to be no standard or rhyme or reason why they could give some details during an ongoing investigation, but not others. Then you have one side, in this case the Democrats, that half of them want to use this to grandstand about some other issue that's not connected. In this case, we need to ban AR-15s. We need to have gun control. So that was the direction they took it. Although there were some Democrats that did express outrage at what was going on. And then you had the Republicans that demanded she resign. A couple of them use a couple swear words. And then ultimately all of those Republicans will continue to fund everything for the FBI, Secret Service, and all these people while they shake their fist and write strongly worded letters. There you go. You could... I know I don't sell myself well, but that's it. You could basically turn off the stream. That's it. That's what we're going to be talking about. That's what happened. The end. Oh boy, they got her. First off, it's important to understand this. When you see something like this, the establishment, these institutions are bigger than any one person. I talk about this all the time. That's why I actually focus primarily on, more than any one politician or any one FBI director, etc., are these agencies and institutions themselves. They'll be there forever. James Comey will come and go. Chris Wray will come and go. Hillary Clinton comes and goes. Donald Trump comes and goes. The FBI remains. The CIA remains. The media remains. The NSA remains. The State Department remains. Secret Service remains. Now, when you're in these institutions, and you're of whatever you want to call it, deep state, it's not a term I use often, but you're of the people that are really controlling our culture and our politics in these institutions, and there's many more. Academia, the entertainment industry, corporate America, social media companies, tech. What you don't want are potential outsiders coming in, usurping the stranglehold on power that you have. And that's ultimately what Donald Trump represented. And so they will take Trump out. They're going to remove him in any way. Lawfare, scandals, etc. That's the idea. And it sounds beneficial to be on that side. And it is. And this is very similar to if you read about sort of the Soviet Union. Being a member of the party. When you're a member of the party that's in control, there's all sorts of privileges bestowed upon you. For example, you could wear blackface, like Jimmy Kimmel or Howard Stern. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. You're in the party. It's okay. Now that's just a blatant example. But that filters down to everything. You tell a bad joke and you're not in the party, the consequences for you are devastating. If you're in the party, that's okay. The rules don't apply to you. Until you are a liability to the party. And then they will stab you in the back and they'll throw you to the wolves. They don't care. You are not an individual. You're just one small cog in the party. That's it. That's what Cheadle is, the director of the Secret Service. She's about to find out. Because she's going to be sacrificed. And they'll say, problem solved. And there won't be any real institutional changes. This is the same thing that happens at the FBI. What am I doing here? I don't want ads running during my live stream. Sorry about that. So while you're in the good graces of the party, yeah, it's beneficial. But you're expendable. You're nothing. Joe Biden will find that out as well. Sure, if Andrew wants help, I'll help him. And by the way, even the people that you hear that are the mouthpieces for the party, they know this intuitively. That's why when I debate someone like Brianna Wu, and I say, well, let me outline to you the double standard of the FBI and how, for example, the classified document case, they went after Trump, compared to what they did with Hillary Clinton's team. Hillary Clinton's team, they know that they destroyed classified or subpoenaed evidence. No one faced any legal ramifications of that. And she goes, okay, well, maybe they should. I guess someone in Hillary's team should have been charged. But they weren't. But Brianna doesn't care. Because whatever, sacrifice one cog of the party. We don't care. If that means taking down this outsider, oh boy, it's worth it. That's how they operate. They don't care. For example, they spent years telling you that you were crazy to think that Biden had cognitive decline. That's what they told you. You're crazy. No way. There's no way Biden has cognitive decline. Those are cheap fakes. That's what they told you. That's ridiculous. He's doing the job just great. Biden doesn't have cognitive decline. No. Nope, there's no concerns about him or his age. I don't see it. It's not there. And now he's withdrawing, and it literally took 2 hours, if that, probably 20 minutes after Biden withdrew, go to X, and what's the narrative? From the media mouthpieces, the Democrat mouthpieces, the people, the streamers that are left-wingers. What's the narrative now? What's the narrative? We went from, I don't see evidence of cognitive decline, there's no problem with Biden's age, to the narrative now is, does anyone know? Anyone seen it? Trump's too old. Oh, he's the oldest running nominee in history. He's too old. He needs to withdraw. Can't vote for Trump. And most of the times they're doing it with like smiley face emojis. They know they're full of shit. They know what they're doing. And we'll get into more of that here. They don't give a shit. They don't care at all. They don't care. That's why I said the ultimate candidate for the Democrats are a blank space. What the Democrats, the same people that scream about democracy, what they really want is nameless candidate. Just vote for the nameless Democrat candidate, and then we'll install who we want once that nameless candidate wins. That's it. And then if the American people say the day of the election, the day of voting, Well, we want someone young. Okay, sure, that's maybe what we'll give you. Who knows? We want someone who's more, a policy background. Sure, maybe that's what we'll do. We don't care. That's who they are. So they don't care that Ms. Cheadle is going to have to fall on a sword here. And she will. She'll be fired or resign. That's what's going to happen. She may not know it yet, but that's what's going to happen. What's up, Andrew? Shit, Wilson. So when you see the Democrats agreeing today, oh, you're doing a terrible job, make no mistake. This isn't that they've turned a leaf. It's okay. We'll get rid of that person. Whatever. Move the news cycle on. So the big takeaways from the testimony to me was sort of how she was able to answer specific things. For example, she answered specifically that she knew there were bomb-sniffing dogs there. But she couldn't answer if there were drones there. Why? Why not? Now think about this. The standard answer to these sorts of things is, well, I can't give you details because there's an ongoing investigation. I can't. There's an ongoing investigation. She says that investigation will take 60 days, maybe more. So we won't know. And she doesn't want to give answers that she's not confident in during an ongoing investigation. Okay, that's garbage, but let's take it at face value. Okay, then until the investigation wraps up, she doesn't want to give us little parts of what she knows because it might give a misleading interpretation to the people. Or perhaps those facts will change as their investigation proceeds. But then why can she talk about all sorts of things? Like, she says she's pretty sure it was one gunman. Why say that? Why say, we don't know, there's an ongoing investigation? Why speculate there? Why tell us facts about drug-sniffing dogs being there? And there was a bunch of other facts that she said of that nature. But then when asked specifically, how many bullet casings were there? I can't tell you. Do you know the answer? Yes. The FBI told her how many casings were on the roof, but she can't tell us. Why? She could speculate that it was one shooter. She could tell us about the bomb-sniffing dogs. She could tell us a bunch of other details that seem to benefit her narrative. But selectively, all of a sudden, it was, well, the things that you want to hear, sorry, I can't tell you. She couldn't tell us a timeline of when things occurred. She relied heavily on this because she knows that the narrative is true, that basically there was reporting of this guy, of the assassin, would-be assassin. There was reporting of him being suspicious for like an hour or so before. I don't know the exact time myself, which is excusable because I'm not the Secret Service director like Cheadle. Nonetheless, over an hour before, they found him with a rangefinder. Then there were reports up to 20 minutes before of him being a suspicious person. She claims that a suspicious person is different than a threatening person, because you may say, okay, well, if the Secret Service knew there was this suspicious person out there, and he had a rangefinder, and they may or may not have, it's hard to get answers from her, knew he was climbing a roof and was on a roof, why didn't they usher Trump off stage until they were able to intercept the person? And her answer to that, seemingly, again, she's very evasive, and her answers are, if you're listening, they're very selectively picked for a reason. She says, well, that's because it wasn't a threatening person, it was a suspicious person. We only consider the person threatening if we see a weapon. So in other words, You thought when you go to the airport, have you ever had this happen? I've had this happen. I've not been to the airport very often. And they have a suspicious package, like someone leaves their backpack on the ground and walks away. The airport will literally delay flights until they are able to check out that suspicious package. But not the Secret Service. The Secret Service says, well, until we get there, we'll just leave people mill about the package and we won't stop anything. That's what she says. Maybe that is the policy of the Secret Service, which seems insane. But that's what she says. And so then it's like, well, okay. Well, we have video footage of people for minutes yelling, there's a man on the roof with a gun. Why the delay? And her response, which she's intuiting without saying it, is basically going to be this. Well, the local law enforcement were made aware, but they didn't have any sort of communications with Secret Service. That's what the defense is going to be, if you intuit what she's saying. She's going to say, we didn't know. Other agencies on the ground were like, okay, this is highly suspicious, but we didn't know. So how will we figure out? How would you figure out who knew what, when the Secret Service knew? If you were investigating this, what would you do? What would you look at to find out when there was communications between officers that were aware of this suspicious person and the Secret Service? Put your investigator cap on. What would you do? I know what I would do. The very first thing in my search for evidence to see what the communication failures were between local law enforcement. No, it's not a post-incident report. That could be, if you screw up and then you write a report why you screwed up, that's not direct evidence. What would the direct evidence be? Where would you look? You're just going to go to them afterwards and say, what did you know? That's not what I would do. I would do that. I would interview everyone. But I would certainly know that there is evidence that I would look at. What would that evidence be? Well, don't have a very chatty chat room today. That's okay. The evidence would be the radio communications. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen law enforcement action, such as a parade, a football game, any sort of public event. What you see is that most security, law enforcement professionals, etc., have some form of radio device, whether it be sort of walkie-talkie type things, etc. That would seem to be a place to look. Because if local police says, we received word of this suspicious person at 5:40, and we radioed into Secret Service, hey, there is a suspicious gentleman at a building about 140 yards. He seemed to go around behind the building. He had some sort of package. It looked very suspicious. Does anyone know what the problem is with that? Anyone know what the problem with... I myself, if I was investigating, would listen to the radio recordings. I don't know if they were wearing body cams. I don't believe they were. The problem is, according to Cheadle, there are no recordings. There's none. There is no record of that sort, of the communications. That's the problem. Now, your local police force, how many times have you watched a show about law enforcement where they'll have recordings of 911 calls or recordings of the police calling dispatcher and telling the dispatch, hey, we got a man on foot. He's running on, 6th Avenue there. He's in a black t-shirt. That doesn't exist, apparently, for the Secret Service. They don't have that. Much like the FBI is incapable of having recordings. Remember? When the FBI interviews you, they don't have this. They don't have a phone. They just don't have them. When the FBI interviews suspects, they don't record it. Instead, they keep notes. And those notes become the official record. And if you're the suspect being interviewed and you say, I didn't say that, and the FBI will go, yeah, you did, our notes say it. And you say, but I didn't. They'll say, yeah, you did, the notes say it. And that's it, you lose. And you'd say, can we bring up the recording? I didn't say it. No, we didn't record it. Am I allowed to record it myself? No, you're not allowed to do that. That's... Jimmy Beam says, the radios we used did not have recording capability. And that may be true. Where did you work? Where did you work? The Secret Service? Were you a Green Beret? Were you in protective detail from some of the world's most important people? Probably not. Clearly, you've admitted that there is recording capabilities when calling into dispatch, even if you're calling in from your radio in your car. The idea that the Secret Service with billion-dollar budgets are not recording the conversations that are going on between agents is nonsensical. It's nonsensical. But that's what we're told. So, okay, maybe it is. Maybe it's Secret Service policy that they do not have any recordings ever of communications that are going on the field. Okay, so now we have Cheadle's word. That's it. Cheadle's word is, she don't know. She don't know when they were informed. Now, we're 9 days after when this attack occurred. 9 days. She claims she talked to everyone. Now, let's steelman her argument and say that she's getting discrepancies from people that were on the ground in the Secret Service. For example, let's say the counter snipers say, we were told 3 minutes before the shot was taken that there was a suspicious person. But let's say there's someone else in the Secret Service that says, well, I heard it 5 minutes before. Why can't she divulge the scope of when she's been told? Why can't she say, we've had several people that say 5:48, several that said 5:50? Why can't she say that? She can't say it, she says. Nope, can't say that. Can't. Why? So she just, again, selectively answers, yeah, there were bomb-sniffing dogs there. Were there drones in the sky? I can't tell you that. What do you mean you can't tell? Now, listen, even at that, if she's going to say there's certain things I could divulge and certain things I can't, it makes sense. Things about the killer, it makes sense saying, look, there's a criminal investigation that I can't talk about. But things regarding the policies and procedures of the Secret Service, she absolutely would be able to divulge. Like, for example, why wasn't this building within the Secret Service's perimeter? She admits it wasn't. So they show up 5 days before an event, this event in particular, they showed up 5 days before, and they set up a plan, like an action plan, and they have a perimeter of which they're going to monitor everything with. She admits this building was outside the perimeter. 150 to 200 yards away, direct line of sight to where the president's going to be, and they didn't include it within the perimeter. Why? And why can't she answer that? When asked, like, well, is this like regular policy? She's like, well, each situation's different. Okay? You can't give us any sort of answer? Like, wait a minute, why? That seems nonsensical. She just kept saying, well, it was within our overwatch. Now, brief side note, it is always appalling to me how bad most of the people our congressmen are when they get to ask questions. The format of this is crap anyways. And I don't know how you make it better. Well, I do know how you make it better, but most of the people, even on your side, that are grilling, so the Republicans at this point, that are grilling someone like this, I've no doubt that they're most of them are trying to get to the bottom of something, but they also are using it to bolster their own political standing. So the way to really do this would have 2 or 3 people on the Republican side and Democrat side that actually know what they're talking about to delve deep into questions, as opposed to giving 20 people on each side 5 minutes. Because it just becomes a lot of grandstanding and you don't get into the details. So here's a question that wasn't asked. What are the normal overwatch policies? She kept saying that. We didn't have anyone on the roof, but we had it under overwatch. Okay, I intuit what she means by that is that was a building that was going to be watched by people that they had set up on other buildings. Well, what does that normally look like? Does that mean that there are eyes on that at all times? Does that mean that one person has binoculars and he's tasked with looking at like 30 roofs and that happened to be one of them? What does that mean? Because, as she admits, and we all know, this was a tremendous failure. So was it a failure because there was a lack of resources? Because you had someone on Overwatch that was overworked? He had to operate at 360 degrees. He was the only person. There was only 1 or 2 overwatching, and so he lost track of this roof for 3 or 4 minutes? Is that what happened? Or was there an individual person tasked with looking at that particular roof, and then what's their explanation? They failed spectacular. What happened there? Of course, no one delves in and gets to the specifics of these sorts of things. So we're just told it was on Overwatch. Okay? Why wasn't there anyone on the roof? Well, no one really hammered down on this. They brought it up once or twice without forcing an answer from her. She says because it was sloped. She doubles down. Says that's dangerous. They prefer flat roofs. No shit. Really? Imagine that. Imagine the police let an assassin get away. And the police officers are like, well, the problem was it was a gravel road. We prefer to run on, we actually prefer when we're chasing down a suspect for it to be a very soft, almost like a track and field track. That's what we like that fake rubber. That's what we prefer. We prefer that when we're chasing suspects. So, gravel, that's slippery, and we don't prefer that. So, no shit. Really? That's your preference? Oh boy, that's good to know. I'm sure our enemies will take that into account. And yes, there were a couple people that brought up, look, the slope that the snipers were on was larger. It was a more aggressive slope. But no one really hammered her down and forced her to be like, how can you say it was because of slope when the roof that you put the snipers on was at a higher degree slope? How can that be a possible explanation? But no one hammers down. And I saw someone in the chat say, as soon as you heard her say it was a slope, that's when you knew something was up. Yeah, that's exactly right. The problem is, here's the problem. One, you shouldn't trust any of these government institutions ever again. They've exposed themselves over and over. That doesn't mean they're lying all the time. But you should never trust them just at face value. You shouldn't. You should demand that they have some sort of proof before you believe them. So a catastrophic failure like this occurs, and your first reaction is how did this happen? I don't know anything. I'm not a counter sniper. I've never been involved in high profile security, or for that matter, any sort of security. Never been involved in any of it. I could look. I've been to the Butler Fairgrounds many times. I've gone to the county fair there a lot. I live near there. I'm pseudo-familiar with the location. I can't tell you that I ever really noticed that building or anything like that. But upon seeing pictures of the event and satellite image, if you are a complete layman and you're looking, you would be like, okay, if I had to pick 3 or 4 locations that I think would be dangerous if some terrible person wanted to take a shot, where would it be? This would be one of the 3 locations you would pick. Probably the first one you would pick. Because 1, the roof's not that sloped. Seemed like there was pretty easy access to get to it. It had a direct line of sight and was within a range that most hunting rifles that you could get could comfortably hit. Perfect area for some attempt like this. How can laymen figure that out, but not the Secret Service? How are they incapable of finding that out? I mean, it's very similar to the experts on COVID, remember? When I, a layman, and you, a layman, were like, oh, geez, there's this respiratory virus out there. I bet it affects, like, the elderly people that already have, like, lung and heart disease or compromised immunities, or people that have very little immunity, like infants. That's probably who will be at biggest risk from this. That's what the layman would come up with immediately, with almost no knowledge, just basic common sense knowledge. And yet the experts in places like here in Pennsylvania said, you know what we'll do? We'll lock down the young and healthy people, and then we'll force COVID patients into the very nursing homes with the most vulnerable people. And people like me, when that was occurring in like April of 2020, was like, wait, what? What are you doing? This is a disaster. Thousands of people will die. And they did. And I was told the whole time, you're not an expert. Trust the experts. Same thing here. How can it be that the people who were supposedly, and these aren't experts like, you know, it's the equivalent of this. Like, you work at some small company, they have a tech guy. That tech guy's an expert, and you're not, probably. So you expect that tech guy to know more. But we're talking a different level. We're talking like the tech guy that works for the highest level of government. So you expect him to have an expertise, or her, to have an expertise far beyond what you have and what the average tech guy has. Same here. We're not talking about the security guy at the local mall. We're talking about the most well-funded security agency in the world, the U.S. Secret Service. And they didn't know? They just didn't know. We didn't know. Couldn't figure it out. Now the problem is, when you then have to give an explanation of what happened, your explanation has to be sincere and has to make sense. It can't be, well, it was the local cop's fault, and plus it was a sloped roof. Like, no. That's not going to cut it. I'm sorry, no. And the problem is, when the failure is so catastrophic that you're like, even laymen would see what the problem was, like, immediately, and you guys couldn't see it. And then when the explanation given for the catastrophic failure is so laughable, well, it was a sloped roof. What conclusion do you expect people to draw? They're going to say, you're hiding something. What are they hiding? Gross incompetence, perhaps? Maybe worse? I don't know. Let's say it's your job at work to lock the door when you leave the company, right? So you're the last person out the door of your company, and you got like, you know, maybe you work at a bank, we'll say, right? And you're like, okay, you gotta lock the vault and then lock the door, put in the code probably, set the, you know, make sure the alarm's set, leave. And let's say you're playing Candy Crush on your phone one day, and you just clock out and you forget to lock the vault, forget to lock the door, forget to set the alarm, out your car you go, and someone breaks in and robs the place, steals all the money at the company. Now it's on you. You have to explain yourself what happened. It's going to be real tough to tell the truth, right? It'd be real tough to be like, I was messing around on my phone and I just totally forgot. But you know what's worse? What if instead of telling the truth, you're like, well, let me explain what happened. I was doing a bunch of coke off the asses of hookers, and so I just totally forgot. I was bumping rails on the way out the door off this hooker's ass. I forgot to lock the door. That's an equivalent what the head of the Secret Service just did. They were like, instead of being like, yeah, it was a failure, like, we didn't plan properly, we got lazy. And that's on me. Instead of saying that, they're like, well, the roof was sloped. The roof was sloped. That's your explanation. That's worse. That's worse than just your incompetence. Because incompetence could be, we fucked up. We made a mistake. You saying, well, it's our policy to prefer not to put people on sloped roofs. If I had to take a guess, my guess is that, I don't even know how to do this. I would guess that well over 90% of roofs have some sort of slope. So are you really telling me that you're admitting that what should be the most well-funded, competent security detail in the world is incapable of protecting us from assailants that would be on sloped roofs? That's what you're telling us. That's your excuse. Well, what could we do? The roof was sloped. So, everything about this makes the conspiracies worse and more believable. For example, this woman goes to some ABC News and is more forthcoming than she is in front of Congress when she's subpoenaing. That's just not my word for it. That's Dan Goldman, a Democrat. That's what he said to her. Seems odd that you're more forthcoming to ABC than to us, who have oversight over you. How do you explain that? How do you explain the fact that she's saying, I can't divulge details because it's an ongoing investigation, and then proceeds to divulge details that she feels like? And then's literally saying, like, yeah, I know the answer to that question, but I can't tell you. I know how many casings were on the roof, but I can't tell you. Why? What do you expect people to say? They come out immediately when it's being reported. Look, Trump's team had requested additional security in the past, and it was denied repeatedly. And both her spokesman and her boss, two different people, came out and said unequivocally untrue. No. Then when she's asked today, what'd she say? Everything that was requested for that day in Butler was granted. And one of the Congress people actually had it right. Yeah, they probably got tired of asking. What they were asking for was increased security overall, not just for one event. Yeah, I'm sure there are requests made for specific events. Hey, this event we're going to be at, normally we have 20,000 people. We think there's going to be 80,000. Can we get 4 more agents? I'm sure those conversations happen. But it seems like the conversation that happened was like, the amount of threats against us is increasing. Can we just get a bigger detail in general? No, was the answer. How many times were those requests asked for? She says she doesn't know. How could you not know? Originally, your team and your boss came out and said, no, that's a lie. There were no requests. Now we know there were requests. And when you get subpoenaed to testify in front of Congress, you're like, well, I don't know the details. How do you not know the details? Isn't that the first thing? You didn't know that was one of the most obvious questions that was going to be asked? How long would it have taken you to go to your records department and say, because she admitted that they were requests in writing, how hard would it have been to go to the records department and say, hey, can you get me the requests that came from the Trump team of the times that they requested increased security, like in the past 2 years? Can we dig that up? Yeah, it was 9 times. We denied it 7. She wouldn't even admit to denying it. She was like, well, just because the resources asked for weren't given, it doesn't mean that it was inadequate protection. Well, that's not an answer to the question. Your opinion, Cheadle, on what's adequate is irrelevant because you felt that the protection was adequate in Butler, and it wasn't. It was a catastrophic failure. So what you mean to say is, we disagreed that the increase in agents and the increase in security was necessary for adequate protection. But maybe we were wrong. That's what you mean to say. Then she admits she was aware, allegedly, that there was intelligence going back a while now that said that Iran was looking to assassinate Trump as revenge and retaliation for the death of Soleimani. So you mean to tell me that in addition to just the average domestic threats that someone like Trump no doubt gets, who's been smeared as a Nazi erroneously by almost the entire Democrat establishment for 8 years now, in addition to that, you had credible, not my argument, yours, you had credible information that there was going to be a state-sponsored assassination attempt, and you're denying this guy's his request for increased security. Why? Why is that? What did you expect Trump's team to do? Be like Andy Dufresne from Shawshank Redemption? Remember he writes like the state board for more books for the library, and it takes like 4 years of writing a letter like every day until... Is that what Trump's team was expected to do? Well, he didn't ask for additional that day. Right, because you denied him repeatedly. What conclusion do you expect people to draw? The failure was catastrophic. Even an average person could look and say, why wasn't there someone on that building? The explanations are laughably nonsensical. Well, the roof was sloped. When they were on a more sloped roof, then there are just blatant lies that are coming out. We never denied any security. Well, okay, we did, but not this time. She's giving more information to ABC than she is to Congress, to the point where Democrats in Congress, like Dan Goldman, are like, I think this is really troubling that you're being more forthcoming with ABC than with Congress. What conclusion do you expect the average person to draw? What do you expect them to think? There's no accountability. Here's the truth. This woman will eventually fall on her sword, and if push comes to shove, then yeah, they'll cut ties. But she'll probably end up with some cushy corporate job. That's what'll happen. Don't feel bad for Cheadle. She'll land on her feet, I assure you. Yeah, the Democrats wanted to make it all about AR-15s, and she wouldn't give them the soundbite that they wanted, which she eventually sort of caves in. But Jamie Raskin, it's funny, he says it over... If you go back and watch it, listen to Raskin. Every sentence he says AR-15. Every sentence. We don't want AR-15 attempted assassinations. What's the implication there? It's like, oh, so we're okay with assassinations not with AR-15s? Is that what you're saying? Well, no. What he's saying is, I just want to keep repeating the phrase AR-15 because I think we could make some political hay out of this. Now, I'm no gun expert. I would imagine that 95% of the people in my chat right now know more about guns than me. Aircraft Sparky's in here. He's a streamer. He knows way more about guns than me. I own guns. I've hunted. I've shot guns. But I'm by no means an expert. I know this. An AR-15 was not necessary for that attempt that occurred. Your average bolt-action hunting rifle would be able to hit targets at that range. No problem. And, lest you think, oh yeah, but they wouldn't be able to shoot shots fast enough. Even a manual action rifle like that, you could fire probably around once per second. It's not that hard. The point I'm making is, it's sort of irrelevant in this context of a conversation because the implications like, well, AR-15s are so bad, that's why this occurred. No. With any sort of long rifle, this could have occurred. That's why the question's more about the failures of security that day. Now, let me steelman the Democrats' position. Had this occurred in the other direction, and Joe Biden been shot at, and it been a, or let's say when Trump was in office, so he's in charge of the Secret Service, and Biden, in the run-up to the 2020 election, got shot at, assassination attempt. And there were questions about the failure of Trump's appointed Secret Service. I would be remiss if I didn't say there certainly would have been Republicans that would have been trying to sort of change the conversation. So let's say that person was an illegal immigrant, or someone that was out on bail. You know that the Republicans would have been like, oh, it's terrible, this attempt was terrible, we need to find answers, but bail reform is a huge problem, and this guy was out on bail. Is that how many? I knew Oswald used a bolt action. I didn't know how many shots he got off, but yeah, I knew that it was a rapid amount of shots in a small period. If we believed it, also. But it was just, Everybody should watch that hearing because that's what bureaucracy is. That's everything that I rail against. Those are the people that are really running the country. People like Director Cheadle. That's who's really running shit. And her boss, Secretary Mayorkas. They'll lie right to your face. They can't answer. It's literally like debating, it's like debating Pisco or these people on the left. Like, you'll ask a simple question. Like, at one point, one of the Republicans was like, do you think it's a problem that so many people believe, like, conspiracy theories? And instead of saying, yeah, she's like, I think that it is difficult and behavioral that the people have the right to be able to trust their institutions. And he's like, I don't know why you're, like, quabbling over this word problem. Why are you being defensive about that word? That seems like an easy yes. And when you see people doing that, when you see people that are unwilling to admit things that aren't even to make them look bad. For example, you could be like, had the bullet hit, like a bullet from a rifle like that, if it hit someone in the head, would it have the potential to kill them? You would expect them to be like, yeah. But if instead she was like, well, anytime you're talking about a projectile coming from a firearm, there's always a chance for varying degrees of harm that could occur, depending on the distance, depending on the caliber of the weapon, depending on where in the body that it would hit. Okay, sure, I guess that's true, but I asked a simple question. Now, what they're signaling when they're doing that is they're so defensive. They're not interested in telling you the truth. They're interested in crafting a narrative, and they assume that any question you ask is going to be used to make them look bad. So what they do is they're unwilling to answer anything straightforward. Instead, they'll obfuscate. That's exactly what it's like debating so many of these people on the left. It's one of the reasons I always talk up like Andrew Wilson, and I hope myself. I'm definitely wordy. I need to work on my brevity. That's certainly true. But I'll answer yes, no almost every time. Someone will ask me a question, I'll say, well, it's complicated, but yes. I'll say yes, but let me explain. Compare that to when I ask people questions on the left. Almost, very few of them will just be like, well, no, I don't agree with that. Here's why. That's exactly, like, she can't even agree to simple things. Yeah, that's a problem. People believe in conspiracy. Nope. And even the congressman's like, I don't understand why you're so defensive about that. She did, though, later. So she wouldn't answer if an AR-15 made her job harder. And then someone said, if everyone had AR-15s or machine guns, would it make your job harder? She didn't answer. Then they asked, if everyone had rocket-propelled grenades, would it make your job harder? And she said, yes. And then they were like, thank you. That means it would be harder if they all have AR-15s. Yeah, Sitch and Adam suck too, but it's funny that they had a problem with Pisco. There are a lot of criticisms to make of Pisco. The big criticism that I saw them making about him was that he's basically too confrontational and he's not interested in a good faith discussion. And that's true, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that sometimes I'm like that as well. The problem is, if you're going to invite someone on and then talk shit on that, then you better be clean yourself. Your hands better be clean yourself. Anybody see my performance on Adam and Sitch, where Adam was a total asshole to me the whole time for no reason? Just decided to meme his way through it, interrupt me, be an asshole the whole time. And then Sitch, who I thought I enjoyed talking to, Sitch, who kept calling me bias, said that's why I had disagreements with him about Burisma and other FBI actions, because I was biased, because I'm a Trump supporter. When I said, I think you're biased, he flipped shit and said he was going to kick me off the channel, and how dare I call him biased? And I was like, but you called me biased the whole time. Why was that legit? We're not biased, we're centrist. Well, your bias isn't towards one party or the other, it's towards institutions. That's my belief. Nonetheless, afterwards, I thought, who cares? It's just a stupid, I'm not that upset about it, whatever. I'd do the show again, I'd talk to them again. Adam decided to publicly take to Twitter and tell everyone that I called Sitch a liar. I called him a liar during that video performance, which theoretically could have happened. It was like 4 hours. I said, cool, can you show me the timestamp of that? I'll apologize. No, I'm not going to do that. Then I went back and watched the video myself one day while I was bored. I didn't see me calling Sitch a liar. Didn't see it anywhere. But allegedly, that shows that I'm bad faith. They don't want to talk to me because I called Sitch a liar. Never mind Adam treating me like an asshole the entire time. Never mind Sitch clutching his pearls because he called me biased the whole time and then I called him biased once. Now, I don't give a shit. I'm not entitled to do their show. They got bigger fish to fry. They can probably get bigger guests than me. More power to them. I wish them well. I'll be honest with you. I like watching their show from time to time. I do. I think they get interesting guests sometimes. So, more power to them. I don't feel bad at all. But I just think it's a little rich when they're going to be like, well, Pisco's not interested in good faith conversations, and sometimes he's hyper aggressive. And it's like, okay, dude. It's like, well, who gives a shit? Then don't talk to him. You're gonna have a fucking show to bring him on just to say that, where it's like, dude, you do the same shit. We all do. I do it too. You don't think there's someone watching me right now like, oh, that's Rich of Rob complaining about Adam and Sitch. I called in and he was a huge asshole to me. Yeah, that probably happened. That probably happened. True. But that's why I'm not saying I'll not talk to Pisco because he's an asshole to people. Yeah, he is. So am I sometimes. I think he's worse than me, but who cares? That's what we do. Anyways, I'm tired. That's the second time I've talked about this. I really don't give a shit. More power to him. I wish Pisco well. I wish Adam and Sitch well. Maybe both their channels will blow up and leave me in the dust, and they'll never talk to each other again and be really happy. Good for them. I don't give a shit. So, but that's what happened with this testimony today. So, it's a shit show. You know, Republicans won't do anything. They'll finally force this lady to resign. She'll resign. She will. And she'll say, I never said I wouldn't resign. What I meant was I wanted to see the investigation through to the end before I resigned. Clip it. That's what she'll say. Guaranteed. I know how this shit works. That's how it goes. So, it's a joke. And now there's tons more questions. I saw like the Heritage Foundation came out with like geolocating data and showed that there was like one of the phones that was visiting the house of the shooter was frequently going to a location in DC right outside the FBI building. I'll be honest, it's tough. There's so much shit out there. It's like 2020 with the election, right? Were there problems with the election? Yeah, there's probably problems that need addressed. But the problem is, for every one legitimate problem, there's 50 that are announced that people talk about online that are bullshit. For example, how many times did I have to laugh at the, did you know that right now our Navy SEALs and Green Berets are fighting in Germany in a compound that's owned by Dominion servers? Did you know that? They're trying to get the server. Right now, the Navy SEALs are fighting. That shit was legit going on after the 2020 election. People were talking about that seriously. I had an Emmy award-winning journalist that came on my radio show to talk about that. And I was just like, oh. It's bullshit. And then if there's something legitimately wrong, like, look, in Georgia, we have 160,000 ballots that we don't have imaging for. We don't know where they came from. There's problems with chain of custody. That shit's brushed off. Oh, yeah, like the fighting Dominion server shit, the Navy SEALs, like that. The same was true of 9/11. You'd be like, wait a minute. How come the 9/11 Commission, when they found out that there was funding coming from Saudi Arabia, like stopped looking into the funding? That looks skeptical. What the fuck? And people were like, oh, you think the towers were holograms? You think all the deaths were faked? No? Like, I'm asking a question about funding. Now, to each their own. You're welcome to talk about whatever you want. I don't give a shit. I will make one thing I'll say here. I kind of tweeted out about this, but it's probably worth saying on my show. You should be very, very careful when you're putting up pictures of people and calling them murderers. You should be real careful. Because that could legit ruin someone's life. So, for example, there was this picture floating around of what looked like a trans man. And people were like, this is the shooter. And this is the picture that they don't want you to see. Now, it could be that that is the picture of the shooter. But I don't think so. And more importantly, you shouldn't be posting that shit unless you know. Because what if it's not? What if it's not? One, you've just muddied the waters by spreading disinformation and acting like you knew what was up, which is shit. And second, whoever that person actually is, that could legitimately really screw their situation up. Similarly, there was a woman behind Trump when he got shot, and people were like, that's this lady from the FBI, and she was there signaling the shooter. And I took one look and was like, it doesn't really look like that lady at all. It doesn't look like the FBI lady at all. Now, this lady, let's say she's traumatized because she's a Trump supporter, and she was literally right behind him when he got shot, and now her picture's being broadcast all over social media like she was somehow in on the plot. And she's really this secret... Were there people really from the FBI? Were there people like in her neighborhood that was like, holy shit, her? And you have to realize what you do is you're not just potentially damaging real people's lives by doing that stuff, who will get blamed for being connected to some nefarious shit, but you're discrediting any attempts to actually help the very side that presumably you're cheering for by looking into these things. So to say, look, maybe the Secret Service intentionally stood down. Maybe they're involved in the plot themselves. I don't mind that, as long as you're being careful to let people know. That means you don't take matters into your own hands, you don't engage in violence, whatever. I'm not for censoring any sorts of opinions. And public figures are public figures. But when you're pointing out anonymous photos of basically non-public figures and saying they're involved, that was one of the problems with Pizzagate. Look, there's a lot of shady stuff. We know from the Epstein files how shady some of this shit is. But when you say, this particular pizzeria ran by this guy, here's his name, here's the location of the pizzeria, yeah, that's child sex trafficking. You better be damn sure. That's a bold claim. Because if that person's not, you just ruined their life. If enough people catch on to that narrative. I'm not here to argue, but Rob, he really was. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, you better be damn certain before you say things like that. Particularly with people that aren't really public figures. That's my little tirade there about that. So, of course, you have to sift through, because people, and there are people that are just trolls, man. They don't give a shit about the political ramifications. They just want to get engagement and be, look at this picture. Yeah, this person did it. They don't give a shit. They don't care at all. And then a lot of people that are searching for answers because they can't trust these institutions, they lob on to something like that. And they're like, yeah, look at this. Did you see this? I get it all the time. I'll get DMs. Did you see this? I'm like, I saw that. So, I'm not saying you're a terrible person if you did it. I just, maybe next time, just think a little, because, let's say that you are definitive. This person's involved, and then it's easily provable they weren't. What's that do to your credibility? Why should anyone believe you the next time you say, no, but this thing, now listen to this time it's true. So, I don't know. That's why, even though I got this label as this ridiculous conspiracy theorist, you don't see me doing much of that stuff. Because I'm cognizant of, you don't want to ruin, average people's lives. And anyways, I think my audience gets it. I do. So I'm hoping. But again, if you shared any of that, I'm not saying you're a terrible person. I'm just saying think about it. That's all. What's your problem with 2025, Rob? You mean in general, the year? I don't know. It'll probably suck more in 2024. I guess that's my biggest problem with it. Anyways. Would I moderate the Andrew Wilson Destiny debate? I would. But I thought Myron from Fresh and Fit was moderating it. was my understanding, but I would moderate it fairly. I think I would be fine at that. What's up, neighbor guy? Thanks for the $2. Good evening. Good evening, everyone, he says. Thank you so much. Why's the Restream chat not coming up, by the way? Oh, because I'm not on Restream. That's why. Destiny wants it to be remote. Yeah, I'll moderate. I think I could do it fairly. I think both Andrew and hopefully Destiny would trust me. But they might want to get a bigger name to moderate, too. And the other problem is if I moderate, well, then ethically I could not help either side prepare. So if either Destiny or Andrew said, would you like to come on and debate to prepare, I would be unable to do that. Because I think that once you are aware that you're going to be involved in something, ethically you have to disclose that and moderate your behavior as such. So if I'm not moderating and Andrew said, hey, I'd like to kick around some ideas for you with this debate, I would be more than happy to do it. I would debate Andrew to prepare him. If I am moderating, I will be unwilling to do any of that. Similarly, when Destiny talked to me to help prepare for his Glenn Greenwald Alex Jones debate, I was happy to do it, even though I was hoping the other side won that debate. They didn't do so well, but that's what I wanted to have occur. Had I got called to moderate that debate, I would have told Destiny, no, I can't do that. So, that's... Do I think Andrew's going to crush Destiny? No. I think it'll be close enough that everyone will think their side won. That's how I think it'll go. They will debate in different ways. Andrew will debate in more of a common sense sort of broad approach. Destiny will debate in sort of looking into specific details. Andrew's not going to be concerned with that. And Andrew's right. This wasn't an insurrection, or it was an insurrection, but you've broadened the definition of insurrection so widely that all sorts of things are insurrections that we've never had this reaction to. That's basically what Andrew's argument will be. Destiny's argument will be, but I've looked into thousands of pages of exactly what this false electors was, and this was an insurrection. That'll be the debate. So if you're a Destiny fan, you'll say, like, for example, when I debated Destiny on the alternate electors, granted I only had 20 minutes on that space, and only about 5 minutes of it was on the alternate electors, but Destiny's audience is like, crushed. He crushed me. I don't think he did. Then if you see people, I got all these people messaging me saying, you crushed Destiny. The truth is, I think we both made our points. There wasn't enough time to get into the details or to have a more serious debate that you could definitively say that one side of the argument's correct, in my opinion. But everyone's mileage will vary. I thought I did fine. See, Zen says I crushed him. And I did crush him objectively, except maybe the elector's point. And the reason I objectively crushed him is because he couldn't defend his position, so he deflected to talking about things like, but James Comey, but Hunter Biden, they arrested him. And the problem for him is, he's just going to flat out get his ass kicked anytime we get into that world of things. And so he had to literally walk away, which I'm not saying he walked away on purpose, but that's what happened. He got up, walked away, and came back and said, yeah, okay, let's redirect over here. He was getting his ass kicked and had to completely shift. So, yeah, Zen gets it, yeah. So that's that. Now... So that's what's going on now. There's a lot coming out about sort of more stuff. Allegedly, there was a man in a gray suit that was requesting photos from the Secret Service agents after the shooting had occurred. No one seems to know quite who that is. There's something going on. I saw Dan Bongino talking about this. He tweeted out that someone should ask Cheadle if she uses encrypted software to talk to people like Signal, which she admitted. She then sort of backtracks and says, well, she talks to people that are like cohorts, but not business. Now, I'm guessing, I haven't really delved into this, but I'm guessing what's being implied here is that she talked to Merrick Garland or she talked to people at the White House to sort of craft the narrative. That's my guess. And so it's like, oh, you used encrypted software, blah, blah, blah. That's my guess as to what's going on there. But I don't really know the specifics of that. I haven't listened to Dan Bongino's show, but I assume that's where that's coming from. I guess the last thing I'll take a stab at what I think really happened. This is either incredible gross incompetence that's sort of... Why would it be gross incompetence? I think that it's partially incompetent. This is my best guess. I have a very low certainty that this is what happened, but I think it is the most likely scenario in my opinion, if that makes sense. I think this is a combination of incompetence and corruption. Here's why. I think that straight from the White House down, they hate Donald Trump, and that culture probably permeates through every institution, including the Secret Service. And I think because of that, they don't give a shit if his protection's adequate. Shut up, we'll do the bare minimum, we don't give a shit. I think they knew that there were increased threats against Trump, and they were like, business as usual. That's what I think happened. Do I think that they trained this Crooks kid? No, I don't. But I think that if you were negligible intentionally, and meanwhile, people were setting up the narrative that Trump's this Nazi supporter, democracy-ending God King, that given enough time, something horrible is going to happen. Let me give you an example. A person that gets in a wreck drinking and driving didn't intend to harm someone. And they may drink and drive 100 times without incident. Yeah, Calvin, I'll talk about that here maybe. But if you know there's a 1% chance that you could harm someone drinking and driving, and you do it every day, you're culpable when it happens. I mean, you're responsible anyways, but I mean, that's entirely predictable. If there's a 1% chance of something occurring and you do it every day, inevitably, it's going to happen. You can't be like, oh, we didn't see it coming. Yeah, drinking and driving's bad. I agree. But what I'm saying is, do you understand why I use that reference? Because a lot of people that drink and drive, when you talk to them, they'll say, oh, I've done it before, nothing happens. Right. But you know it can happen. And if you do it all the time, it will happen. It's just a law of average. It's the same here. You know eventually someone's going to try to do something violent to Trump. And, listen, to a lesser extent, I think you could say the same of Biden. Because we live in a hypercharged political environment, and there's crazy people. I think it's worse with Trump because apparently there were credible threats from foreign actors, in addition to sort of the hyperbolic rhetoric that's been against him. But, I would believe that this might not be popular with my audience. Who do you think has a better chance of having some sort of violent act against them? A moderate Republican like Mitt Romney or AOC? I think it's AOC. I think AOC's very polarizing. And as such, someone who's out there and has a big presence and it's polarizing, probably a bigger chance for some unhinged lunatic to do something. Now with Trump, it's magnified well beyond AOC. It really is. So if you're tasked with security and you're like, well, we don't really give a shit. That's a huge problem. Now, is it possible that some MK Ultra-esque CIA experiment convinced this kid to do this? I suppose that's possible. Is it possible that this is just a complete blunder and that actually the Secret Service culture has been very diligent up to this point of providing the best possible security for Trump? It's possible. And this was just the 1 in a million chance that they had brain farts to the point where even the average person could easily see wait, what? Sloped roof? What? But I think incompetence / a culture of disliking Trump and intentionally giving him inadequate security is the most likely scenario. If you play the lottery every day, right? All right, Calvin asked specifically about the January 6th narrative. Since I've not, you can clip this and send it to Andrew Wilson if you like, since I've not been tasked with moderating that debate yet, I will say what my argument against Destiny's January 6th narrative is. First off, Destiny uses the term insurrection. Now, he has yet to define what insurrection means, and it's a very interesting choice of a word that he's making. The reason he's using that word is because he needs to connect January 6th and the actions of that day and the perceived violence that occurred there to the elector scheme. And the reason he needs to do that, and the Democrats need to do that, is because you're not going to get people fired up about Trump using alternate electors. That's not going to resonate with people. And before people say, oh, well, Rob's claiming that he's somehow better, that he talks... No, because, like, I talk about shit like FISA-gate, Russiagate, the Burisma scandal. That also doesn't resonate with the average people. It doesn't. Fairly or unfairly. That's the truth. So if you're a Destiny supporter and you're listening and you're going, oh, that's ridiculous, you're saying the alternate elector. No, I'm just telling you, you might think that it's the biggest story in the world, but I'm telling you that it's going to be difficult to get the average person on board with it. They're going to be like, I don't know, it sounds weird, I don't know. That's what the average person understands violence. They get that. And so that's what the Democrats and Destiny in particular are trying to do. They're trying to connect the alternate electors scheme with an insurrection, right? Now, to me, without looking up the definition, but insurrection implies some amount of violence. So, for example, you could theoretically buy your way into the presidency. Remember when Rod Blagojevich was sent to jail for allegedly selling like a Senate seat? He was like resigning from the Senate and he sold it to the highest bidder, basically. Like, that's not an insurrection because there wasn't violence. You could say maybe you'd say it's a coup. Maybe you'd say it was elsewise stealing an election. But to me, the term insurrection implies violence. So when Destiny says that it was an insurrection, he has to say that Donald Trump was somehow involved in some sort of planning of a violent action, which he has zero proof of. So then we get to the day of January 6th itself. Was January 6th an insurrection? Now, the problem that Destiny's going to have is this, that he already made the argument that it is evident to anyone who objectively watched the footage that it wasn't a serious attempt to overthrow the government. He made that argument right after January 6th and up to a year later on panels that I was on and elsewhere. That was his argument. And the argument is sound and true, that if this was really an attempt to overthrow the government and to physically harm senators, etc., in order to wrest control of the government from them, they would have certainly did more. Because at this point, they already got past police, and even the official narrative is, when you see people like the police officers opening the doors and leaving people in, it's because they were overwhelmed. In other words, the mob was winning. That's why they said, okay, let's de-escalate, let's let them in. So if they really were going to attack the seats of power, they would have done more than basically mill around. Yes, there were clashes with police outside, but that was violence that got out of control. And Destiny even admits back then, he says, of course, there could have been some LARPers from places like the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, etc., that maybe talked a big game about doing something, but the vast majority of the people there weren't involved in anything like that. Destiny, to steelman his position, will now be, with increased evidence, we now see that some 10 to 15% of the people there were involved in some sort of organization. Even still, clearly, the original argument that he made, which is self-evidentially true, it wasn't an attempt to overthrow the government. It wasn't. So then the question becomes, okay, if it wasn't an attempt to overthrow the government, one, to me, then it's not an insurrection. But second, even if you want to broaden the definition to say it is an insurrection, the question is, what connection did Trump have towards that? And there's two areas of connection that they have. The first is the arguments that were made in the Colorado court case to keep Trump off the ballot. And that's basically that the tweets that Trump was putting out was a call to incitement of violence, which is absolute bullshit. Now, this was probably the most investigated day in the history of our FBI. I'm unaware of even one degree of communication between Trump and any of the people in the Proud Boys or anyone else that was charged with any sort of crime on January 6th. I've not seen any communications alleged between them where Trump was telling them what to do on January 6th. None. Zero. Not even claims from people that testified against him. Nothing. There's been no claims. So then how did Trump incite this? Well, it's from tweets that he put out that said things like, fight like hell. Literally a comment that basically every politician makes. Or when he retweeted someone from a group saying, the cavalry is coming. When he said, be peaceful, they had an expert testify in the Colorado trial, that actually was a dog whistle for be violent. And then what Destiny himself will say is, Trump told those people to march to the Capitol. Okay, well, simple. I used this explanation the other day. Let's say I leave this building that I'm in right now, and I get down the street and I see 4 guys playing basketball at the local basketball court, and I say, hey, you know what we're going to do? I got like a setup. I'm going to set up a DJ booth outside the local gas station. Bring your friends, come on down. It's going to be a blast. Let's go. So they grab 20 other people. They get down to the gas station, and I'm turning the tables, killing it, Everybody's having a blast. So I do it for an hour, and I'm like, thanks, guys. We'll see you later. And I leave, and they hang around, and then they're like, you know what we should do? Have a flash mob to go into the gas station and steal a bunch of shit. Did I incite that? Would Destiny say, but Rob, you told them to go there. Okay. So? Did I tell them to go be violent? Did I tell them to steal shit? No. Yes, it's undoubtable that what Donald Trump wanted was a big presence outside the Capitol as a signal to Mike Pence and to the Congress that people were outraged because they thought there were legitimate problems with the election and they wanted answers. And they felt like those answers weren't forthcoming. And there's no problem with Trump wanting them to do that. There's a problem if he wanted them to engage in violence, but there's no problem with them saying, have your voice peacefully heard. None at all. If they then engage in acts of violence, Trump's not responsible for those acts of violence. Simple. So that's the argument, well, he sent them there, so? Then the other argument is, but he didn't call the Secret Service. Now, this is laughable when you consider that literally the professionals that were in charge of security, with the exception of the head guy that was in charge, Capital City Police Chief Sund, who desperately requested the Secret Service over and over, or the National Guard over and over, all of them said no because of optics. There's a lot of hullabaloo about, did Trump request the National Guard be there before January 6th? It seems that he at least gave some sort of off-the-cuff comment about it. And even then, they were told no. We do know for a fact that Capitol Chief Sund has testified that he was not properly informed of the intelligence of what was going to go on January 6th. He thought that he was less informed than almost every other protest or rally that occurs in D.C., which always has better collaboration between various agencies. For some reason, he's incredibly skeptical at the lack of sharing of information at this one, even though we're told that the FBI had informants that were telling them that there was about to be an insurrection. Somehow that information never got delivered to the guy who was tasked with defending the Capitol. That guy directly went, Capitol Chief Sund directly, he had to go through a board in order to be able to request the National Guard. And I forget who the third person on that board is, but 2 of them are the Sergeant-at-Arms under the Senate, which would be under Mitch McConnell, and the Sergeant-at-Arms under Nancy Pelosi, whose name was Paul Irving. So he goes to Paul Irving first and says, can we have the National Guard? And Paul Irving hems and haws. Then he goes to the other guy under Mitch McConnell. And as soon as he walks in, he says he thought it was weird that right out of the gate, it was like the guy knew what he was going to say and was like, no, we can't do it. Months later, after January 6th, he would have dinner with that second Sergeant of Arms, whose name I'm sadly forgetting. And he said, can I ask you a question? It seemed like when I came and asked you that question, like you were already prepared for an answer and said that the answer was no. How did you know what I was going to ask? And he said, because Paul Irving, the Sergeant at Arms under Nancy Pelosi, called him and said, make something up. Nancy said no, she'll never go for it. So Nancy Pelosi directly said, according to the testimony of Capitol Chief Sund, he was told that Nancy Pelosi, even before January 6th, said, no, can't have the National Guard there. So that seems odd. Why was Trump supposed to overrule them? And you might say, okay, fine. That's before. Those are behaviors before January 6th. What about once January 6th occurred? What about once the riots started? Shouldn't then have Donald Trump declared the National Guard be there? Well, who do you think knows more about security? Donald Trump or Paul Irving? Or Lieutenant General, I forget his name, Williams maybe? Because Capitol Chief Sund requested over and over permission to ask for the National Guard, and Paul Irving kept saying, let me run it up the chain. Now, Paul Irving's only chain was Nancy Pelosi. And so for over an hour, Sund desperately called everyone he could think of, trying to get it waived so he could request the National Guard. They were told no for optics. If Donald Trump would have went over the wishes of Nancy Pelosi, professional security people, including generals, and said, oh, they're saying it's bad for optics, but I'm going to deploy them anyways, what would the narrative we'd be talking about today be? Donald Trump's a fascist. He deployed the military. He tried to make the National Guard his own Gestapo, his own brown shirts, in order to overthrow the government to stay entrenched in power. That's what the professionals were saying why they shouldn't deploy the Guard. So why should Trump have went over them? We then have Irving said that the first time that Sund called him, he said, yes, you could request the Guard. Sund says that's not true. He called several times and he has the receipts to prove it. Now, one of them directly lied to the January 6th committee. Why hasn't that been sussed out? Seems pretty clear. Sund's very confident. He says people were in the room. I have the receipts. I have the phone logs. I presented them all. So it sounds like Irving's lying. That's funny. Anyone who's connected to lying to the Trump team instantly goes to jail or charged with crimes. But this time, even when I talked to Pisco about this, he's like, I admit, it sounds like someone's not telling the truth, and it's probably Paul Irving. It's weird that there's not a big clamoring for that person to be held account, huh? By the way, the other Sergeant at Arms, he's dead now. So he didn't make it very long after January 6th. Donald Trump did, about an hour after it was getting out of control, he did tweet out that people should be calm, that the police were on our side and they're great patriots. Then he told people to go home around 4 o'clock. Is it possible that Trump should have said, hey, whoa, things are getting out of hand, calm down, don't engage in acts of violence? Yeah, it's possible. Now, 2 caveats to that. One caveat. When you look at the actual footage from that day, most of it wasn't that. Most of the damage that was occurring to police was self-inflicted. Like they would shoot tear gas into a mostly peaceful crowd and then end up hitting themselves and their own officers. For example, when you see the sort of initial breach, some of the people that were charged with assaulting police officers were doing things like this, shoving signs into police officers. Well, that's what Ray Epps did, but he wasn't charged with violence. And when you look at it, you're like, it's not that bad. But that's what many of the other people were charged with. Now, no doubt, once things got heated, there certainly were people that deserved to be charged that were engaged in acts of violence. But overwhelmingly, it wasn't as violent as you're led to believe. Yes, there were isolated patches that there was violent interactions occurring. But the idea that Donald Trump was sitting there and was like, wow, did it look worse than, say, May 31st, 2020, when the National Guard wasn't deployed? No, that looked way worse. As far as they were using Molotov cocktails. Did it look worse than the Summer of Love, where we were told that it would be authoritarian to deploy the National Guard? No. Didn't. And they all screamed that Trump couldn't deploy the Guard, and that would be fascism. Tom Cotton wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, said maybe we should deploy the National Guard. No, that'd be fascism, said the writers at the New York Times. They threatened to quit until they removed the op-ed, which they did. So this one time, though, Trump was supposed to override all of that. Having said all that, I do think Trump should have done more. I absolutely do. I think Trump was desperately trying to convince Mike Pence, and he thought, oh, they're smearing my supporters. They're almost all mostly peaceful. Fuck these people that lied for all year about the riots that we saw on the left. And now we see things getting out of hand on the right, and they want me to jump in when they didn't say shit. I'm not concerned about that right now. I'm concerned about convincing Mike Pence. We think the election was stolen. You got to do something. That's hardly inciting an insurrection, though. Who's the better debater? I haven't seen Haas a lot, to be honest. That's the argument about January 6th being an insurrection and Trump inciting it. It wasn't an insurrection. Or if you want to say, well, I've broadened the definition so much, well, then May 31st, when violent lefties attacked the White House, was an insurrection. And there were dozens of Black Lives Matter rallies that would also be insurrections. No problem, Calvin. Now, that's just half the answer to his objection, right? Because what his real beef isn't January 6th. He just understands optically you have to tie January 6th to the elector scheme because people aren't going to get excited about a legal challenge. So you have to make it sound like a violent insurrection. And again, to me, the term insurrection implies a certain amount of violence. I don't think Destiny has any good answer as to how that was an insurrection, given that he's already admitted that it clearly was a riot that got out of control, or how Trump's connected to it, other than that he was there. But still could be true that the alternate elector scheme was very damaging on its own right. And that's where Destiny spends most of his time arguing. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't delved too deeply. I've probably read 80 to 90 pages of material on this, but I certainly haven't done the work that I have on other subjects. I'll fully admit that. I think I should be given a little grace. I think I've done more work on it than fucking 99% of people, particularly right and left-wing commentators and streamers. Even still, I should do more, but I have a full-time job. It's tough. Yeah, if Andrew was smart, he would absolutely, immediately get Destiny to define the term insurrection. And he should be prepared for examples of other insurrections that would meet Destiny's definition to see if Destiny was as hyperbolic about those as he is about this one. That's absolutely how Andrew should start the debate. So the elector scheme. What the elector scheme was an attempted legal challenge by Trump's team to force state-level courts to look at allegations of illegality in the 2020 election. That's what it was. It was a legal attempt to have an investigation. That's what occurred. That's it. You may disagree. You may even think that that legal attempt was unconstitutional. The question is, does it rise to the level of criminality? I don't believe it does. For example, is Joe Biden's student loan scheme constitutional? Is it? I say no. The court said no initially. Does that mean Joe Biden goes to jail? Of course not. Presidents, governors, politicians, etc. do things all the time that are considered illegal, unconstitutional. We don't criminalize them and say, okay, now you go to jail. Capitol flag's been lowered to half staff. I don't know. So, in a nutshell, what occurred was there were various states where there were allegations being told to Trump by people, voting machines going haywire, illegals voting, problems with mail-in ballots, questions of the legality of mail-in ballots and other forms of voting, etc. Trump couldn't get these cases heard. Now, the way that, I don't have the specific dates in front of me, but basically the way this works is there is, I don't know if it's the Constitution specifically or just laws that have derived from the Constitution that says that there is a time frame for when things have to occur. So the electors need to be sent to Washington by a certain time. They need to be counted and accepted by a certain date, etc. So the problem would be this. Let's say, we'll take my state of Pennsylvania because I happen to know a little more about it. One of the objections that Trump's team had in Pennsylvania was that mail-in ballots themselves in Pennsylvania are against the Constitution of Pennsylvania. You might say that sounds ridiculous. It's not that ridiculous. In fact, a court originally found that yes, that was absolutely true, that the mail-in votes were against the Constitution of Pennsylvania. Now, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has since overruled that. But there was about a 3 or 4 month period where in Pennsylvania, mail-in ballots were illegal. Now, let's say that that would have stuck, hypothetically, right? Let's say that there was an argument that we think that these mail-in ballots, the changing of the law surrounding the 2020 election to accept mass mail-in ballots was unconstitutional. If it's unconstitutional, that means those ballots shouldn't count, which means Trump won Pennsylvania, right? Let's say that a court ruled, you're right, and then the Supreme Court said, yes, you're right. What would have happened if there wasn't an alternate slate of electors? What would have happened? Well, Biden would have been declared the winner. He would have been sworn in. About 7 months into his presidency, a court would have said, oh no, Pennsylvania was wrong. The ballots here were wrong. And let's say another state did that as well, and it was enough to switch the election that Trump should have won. Too late. They're not going to redo the election. They're not going to hand it to Trump. They'll say, well, next time you can't do that. That's it. You've already been sworn in. Game over. That's what's occurring. I looked into this a little. I'd need to talk to a lawyer that could explain this better, but apparently things like this occur in law quite frequently, where you'll file a placeholder litigation. In case something happened, we have a certain time frame. We have 2 years to file a suit, but we're still not sure if we're going to do it. So you basically do a placeholder thing so that it extends the time frame that you have. That's what was occurring. How do we respond to this argument in addition to Trump calling for the suspension of the Constitution? When Trump's calling for the suspension of the Constitution, what he's talking about is the argument that we have to declare a winner, the electors have to be called at a certain time. Trump's basically saying, look, the Constitution outlines timeframes and rules for the process of electing a president. But if it's incredibly fraudulent, we have to suspend that time frame in the rules that we normally have because the whole process was corrupt. That's what he's saying. Now, I think it's a terrible thing to say, particularly as someone who favors the Constitution like myself. My friend Aircraft Sparky here is really fucking infuriated by the fact that Trump said that. Like, go listen to his stream someday. He'll tell you all about it. To him, that was almost a defining moment for Trump. And I understand. But the problem is, Trump often shoots his mouth off and says crazy shit. And you may argue that that's a reason that he shouldn't be president, and it's a fair argument. It's fair. I disagree, though. I think Trump's just he's like, the dude's like, why don't we just fucking bomb all those people? And someone's like, yeah, we can't do that. Yeah, you can't just bomb people like that. Oh, okay. What were the results, though? Trump's got a big mouth, and? Did he lock all of his opponents up? No, that's what the Democrats do. Did he try to keep people off the ballot? No, that's the Democrats. That's what they do. You see, the Democrats' argument is, hypothetically, Trump was going to be an authoritarian, suggested going after his opponents and doing this, that, and the other. And then what happened in reality? Nothing. Did he leave office January 20th? Yeah, he did. That's another argument that Destiny will make. Destiny makes the argument, well, Rob says that what would have happened, this is what would have happened. What would have happened would have been as follows. I'm 90% sure. I have to look into the legality of this a little more. So what would have happened would have been something like this. If you read the memo from Eastman, his attorney, this would have then forced, if Pence had accepted the alternate slate or said, I'm not sure, I can't accept either slate, what would have happened then, it would have went back to the states who would have argued within each state whether or not these fraud issues or constitutionality issues occurred. If the Democrats are right and there was no evidence of fraud or anything like that, then fine. What would have happened would have been Joe Biden would have been declared the winner. If some states would have said, no, we see fraud, we're now going to shift, what would have happened would have been the same as Bush v. Gore, that the Supreme Court would have came in and said, now we're going to look. The argument that Destiny will make is, but how do you know that if the courts ruled against Trump, that he would have inevitably left? And you know how I know? Because he left. Because if your argument is, even if the court ruled against him, he wouldn't have left, then why did he leave? In fact, according to Destiny and the entire Democratic Party, a few thousand Trump supporters literally was on the cusp of violently overthrowing the government without any weapons. So at that point, they knew they had them by the balls, right? Trump supporters are mighty. They could overthrow the government at a whim, right? So why'd he leave? Maybe it's because they're hyperbolic and full of shit. Now you may be, by the way, I was never for Mike Pence accepting the alternate electors, and I'm one of the few people that will admit to you, presuming Joe Biden finishes out his term, If Trump wins and Kamala Harris is vice president and says, nah, I'm going to accept an alternate slate of electors, I'll be fucking pissed. Absolutely. Would be pissed. But I don't think Kamala Harris committed a crime. I just say it should be rejected and Trump should be declared the winner. I don't know what Andrew will do on that point. Well, if they don't leave, then it's a different situation. It does look bad optically, it does. But it's a legal challenge. Now, conversely, the Times Magazine article that talked about a shadowy cabal fortifying the election for Biden, it says that they were lined up with legal challenges out the wazoo if Biden had lost. There would have, I almost 100% guarantee that there would have been talks of alternate slates of electors. The problem was, because there was so little faith in our election going into 2020 because of the massive changes that resulted from COVID, whoever lost was going to cry bullshit. Would it have been criminality? If, for example, we find out that people that were involved in that shadowy cabal Time Magazine talks about, had they pre-discussed, okay, how do we get alternate electors? Did they commit a crime? At what point is it a crime for Donald Trump to talk about this? Is the mere act of talking to his lawyers and saying maybe we should do this alternate, is having that suggestion, that discussion, is that the crime? Or is it only once they actually get the alternate electors? That's the crime. Let's say I think that the Pennsylvania system's broken and I send a form after the 2024, regardless who wins, it doesn't matter, I say it's broken. Let's say Trump wins here in Pennsylvania, and I declare myself an elector and send a form to Kamala Harris and say, Kamala, I am one of the real electors because the whole thing was fraudulent and really you won. Did I commit a crime by just sending that? You'd say, well, shit, you can send whatever you want, right? They're just like, no, we're not going to accept this. Yeah, Destiny he's doing better now because we're away from the emotional losses that the Democrats were receiving, so he's more calm because he's a petulant child. That's what happens. When you're of a privileged class, equal treatment seems like discrimination. When you root for the establishment and they win 99% of the time, you don't know what it feels like to get a couple losses. That's what happens. And so you lash out. You scream, you rail against, that guy deserved to die. If it was my parents, they deserved it too. Fuck around, find out. All Trump supporters that go to a rally have to... That's the type of shit you say when you're not used to taking losses. I even tweeted out the other day, I said, hey, now that they got Biden out of the race, and I think that definitely improves Democrats' chances of winning. So that's seen as somewhat of a victory for Democrats. Can those, the crybabies that were whining, now stop saying that they wanted Trump assassinated or that Trump supporters are fucking around and finding out? Can they calm down a little on the rhetoric now? The last thing I'll say, and this is something that Andrew Wilson should certainly say, Destiny focuses a lot on the Supreme Court immunity decision, and he claims that that decision basically makes Trump unprosecutable. He's a king, he's above the law. That's not what the decision did. Even if I think there are legitimate criticisms that Destiny and Pisco could make. And at some point, I've agreed to talk to Pisco about that because, I'll be honest with you, I'm not so sure how off Pisco is. If I can give my comments on the immunity decision, admitting, again, that I've only read about 70 to 80 pages of this decision, here's my take on why I think there is a legitimate, reasonable criticism. I do not want a world where a president has total immunity. However, I do not want a world where presidents can be charged like anyone else for anything. Because it is clear what will happen will be that the legal system will be weaponized by the opposition every single time in order to use lawfare to stop their opponents, which is what the Democratic Party is doing right now to Donald Trump. And we see the results of what that looks like. I think that's absurd. You're leading to state prosecutors just on a whim, coming up with novel legal theories that have never been done, charging Trump with felonies just so they can say, oh, he's a convicted felon. You want to vote for a convicted felon? That's nonsensical. Clearly, it would get out of control very quick. So I wanted the Supreme Court to make a decision that basically said, listen, Of course, the standard for prosecuting a president is higher than the average person. And presidents can get away with some things that the average person can't, but not everything. There definitely are things that can be prosecuted. And ultimately, this decision accomplishes that. It says that there are 3 types of scenarios that you could look at criminally charging a president. The first is what they call the core duties. A core duty would be something like pardoning power. The Constitution blatantly says the president has to pardon. So the argument would be you can't prosecute a president for a pardon. So let's say that Biden comes out tomorrow and says, I'm pardoning my son Joe Biden or I'm pardoning my son Hunter Biden because Hunter Biden has a bunch of evidence of crimes I've committed. Or Hunter Biden, how about this? Hunter Biden's given me $1 million to pardon him, so I'm going to do it. And you say, that's bribery, you can't do that. He could pardon, you can't charge him for the pardon. And it makes sense because every single pardon that's given then would then be investigated. Why did he do that? Was he given something in return? Which basically nullifies the pardoning power because now you're pardoning people for a reason. So if we can investigate that reason. So I get it. It makes sense. That's section 1. Can't prosecute. You have immunity from core behaviors as the president. Got it. Then there's things that are not your duty whatsoever. For example, president gets drunk, driving, runs over a person on the street. Absolutely could be prosecuted, even while they're president. Because it has nothing to do with the official duties of being a president. Makes sense. I'm for that. Then there's the third area, which is the gray area. And those are things that are official duties, but not core duties, or part official and part non-official duties. And what the court said was, you can prosecute for those sort of behaviors, but there is presumptive immunity. And so we presume that a president's immune. Therefore, it's up to the prosecutors to go in front of a legal body, a court, etc., to argue, here's why we think what we're prosecuting needs to happen. And the burden is that they have to be able to prove to a court that this prosecution won't interfere with the official duties of the office of the presidency. So that's the threshold. Now, you could still meet that threshold. Arguably, they could meet that threshold with the classified documents case or with the elector's case. But they would have to prove it. The reason they're freaking the fuck out is because it seems that there are serious questions about what evidence could be used, such as the core duty of talking to your attorney general can't be used as evidence. And more importantly, because they feel that this means that these cases now won't be heard until after the election. Because what they're really concerned about is locking Trump up before the election because they're not confident they could win on Joe Biden's record. So all the gnashing of the teeth and the yelling and screaming, that's what's really occurring. They're pissed off they can't throw Trump in jail for these charges before the election. That's all it is, right? So Sotomayor makes the argument, listen, wouldn't this mean that the president could use SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his opponent? And that's the argument that you hear people like Destiny making, right? Here's the problem. They know that's bullshit. They know that's not true. But they sort of have a point. This is what they're getting at. The problem with this decision, and there's a legit argument here, is who gets to define what a core duty is? Because the core duties have absolute immunity. So who defines those? And there's not a good answer. Pardoning's easy. It's directly said in the Constitution. But the court says discussions with a president and their attorney general is a core duty because one of the core duties of the president is to enforce the law. So his chief law enforcement person is the attorney general. So those conversations need to be protected. That's part of his core duty. But it's not clear that that's what the Constitution's saying. Okay, yeah, you enforce the law as the chief executive, but does that mean that part of your core duty is talking to the attorney general? Where's the threshold? It's a solid argument. And so the way they draw it out to an absurd extent to try to prove the point is saying, well, the president's the chief of the military. So does that mean if he orders SEAL Team 6 to kill his opponent, that too is part of his core duty that he would have immunity from? Yeah, we could talk about that, Omar. But the truth is, the SEAL Team 6 scenario would never occur because oftentimes what happens is the court will make decisions like this, but then when a scenario comes up that's clearly like insanely ridiculous, they sort of just ignore. They're like, okay. And that's what would happen. For example, if Biden right now ordered the assassination of Trump, if that legitimately happened, and he just came out and was like, yeah, I'm the chief law enforcement executive. We had credible evidence that Donald Trump was a terrorist. We ordered his assassination. That's it. There is zero chance the Supreme Court wouldn't say, yeah, you could absolutely investigate that. He does not have immunity. And you might say, but that's the reality. And they know that. And I bet if I debate them, at least Pisco would admit that. So it's more about not being able to prosecute Trump now. Now, the truth is, they don't believe what they're saying because they'll still favor Jack Smith going forward with his case. They won't say, no, that's part of Trump's core duty. He has absolutely immunity. They won't. So they know that this doesn't give Trump immunity from everything ever. They know that. They're just pissed off because they were gung-ho. These cases are going to get Trump. That's what it was. That's what all the gnashing of the teeth is. So when you hear Destiny yelling and screaming, Trump's gay, and I've seen his audience sort of make this argument, I don't know about him, which is something to this effect. Well, when you have a legal method in order to take out a tyrant, then you use it. So if you could vote out Adolf Hitler, then you vote him out. But what if you can't? What if he suspends elections? What if he puts himself above the law? What if his courts say you can no longer do anything to him? Well, now you could go outside the scope of the law. That's the argument they say. So the hyperbolic, it was an insurrection. They tried to steal the election. All of it's hyperbolic. They've made Trump an emperor. He's above the law. They've gaslit themselves into thinking that Trump is Hitler and he had a violent attempt to overthrow the country to stay in power and that the courts gave him the thumbs up and said, that's okay, you can do it. That's not what happened. At all. And the question that Andrew Wilson should ask Destiny is this. Well, what should have happened if Trump's team brought cases to the courts and they were unwilling to be heard? What do you think Destiny's argument would be? What should have, put your left-leaning hat on. What should have happened if Trump's team thought that there were legal challenges that the courts were unwilling to hear or wouldn't have time to hear? What should have happened? What should they have done? Anyone? What do you think he'd say? I think it's simple. I know exactly what they'd say. Because they said it. Trump and Trump supporters say, oh, the courts wouldn't even hear our cases. What do they say? Too bad. That's it. That was your chance. That's what they say. There's nothing more. Hey, that's it. The election's over. The courts have weighed in. Right? That's what they say. Anyone disagree? Hey, my chat's not working, or let me see. There we go. It's working. Everybody agrees, right? That's all right, John. Question was, what would Destiny and the Democrats say if you said, but wait a minute, Trump's team was upset that the courts wouldn't weigh in, that they wouldn't hear these cases? They'll say, too bad. Let's say they were all dismissed on standing. They'll still say the same thing. So, hey, that's the system. Sorry. That right? Everyone agrees. That's what they'd say, right? You don't get to do the alternate electors stuff. You don't get to do that. You don't get to do January 6th. No. Sorry. You tried. You took it to court. Court said no. That's it. That's their argument. Why is it different now? Court just said, no. Trump has presumptive immunity. And all of a sudden, Destiny's argument is, that's bullshit. That's not fair. But wait a minute, Destiny. When it came to claims of election fraud, and illegalities with the 2020 election, you said the courts were the final arbiter. We had to listen. That was his argument. And largely he's right. So why is it different now? Now when the court weighs in a way he doesn't like, he says, that's outrageous. How is it that Destiny says that the Supreme Court's basically in the pocket of Donald Trump? Then why were they unwilling to hear Texas's case about the 2020 election? If they're really there to ensure that Trump never leaves office and destroys democracy, why were they unwilling to even hear the case? And that's the truth. The truth is, Destiny and the Democrats are acting exactly like what they've criticized from Trump and his supporters. By any means necessary is what they're saying. Trump had a legal challenge that didn't work. And I'm glad Mike Pence didn't accept it. But had he accepted it, one of two outcomes would have inevitably occurred. Either one, there would have been definitive evidence of fraud or illegality that would have been shown and Trump would have been declared the winner. The Democrats assure us that that's impossible. It wouldn't have happened. Okay, fair enough. Then what would have happened was the courts would have weighed in eventually that Trump lost, that Joe Biden was the legitimate winner, and Trump would have stepped down. That's what would have happened. So that's my long-winded definitive answer to what Destiny says about the insurrection in January 6th. That's what's going on. They've gaslit themselves so bad into that this was like a violent overthrow of the government and the courts have signed off on it and Trump has immunity from everything whatsoever and he's going to kill democracy and never leave office, that they find themselves saying fucked up things like, if you go to a Trump rally, fuck around and find out. If you get shot, no sympathy. Yeah, I agree with that, Jimmy Beam. I don't know how well Andrew will handle this style of sort of legal debate. So, we'll see. Thursday at 8 Eastern. Like I said, someone, Zen's Forehead, asked if I would consider moderating it, which I would, but I'm guessing they could get a bigger name than me. Which would be fine by me. I don't know. All right. Democracy. Let's tackle this argument, right? World-renowned Geohound said that he was a recovering lefty, or a lefty that's waking up a little. So if there's any lefties in the chat, this is specifically for you. A question to you. But any right-winger could answer as well. But I'm really interested to hear if I'm looking at the situation correctly. Which party has been arguing about the importance of democracy and the other side being a threat to it? Do you think, type 1, if you think that the Democrats have been arguing democracy is very important and the Republicans are a threat to it and Trump's a threat? Or type 2, if you think that argument's being made primarily by Republicans saying Democrats are a threat to democracy? Which side has made that a key plank of their argument? So 1 is Democrats, 2 is Republicans. Yeah. There you go, John. I think that it's unambiguously been the Democrats. I don't think that's controversial to say. That it's been a core tenet of their approach to this election that their opponents are threats to democracy. That's been the argument. I'm not saying that no one's ever said that coming from the right, that no Trump supporters ever said it, that no Republican. I'm not saying that. But clearly, if you asked who is making this a central part of their plank of their strategy, it's clearly the Democrats. So when an action occurs that makes the Democrats seem anti-democratic, it is worth pointing that out. The problem is, what occurs when you point out these double standards is, oftentimes what happens is, the other side that you're criticizing will say, but you have the double standard. So let's rehash. We've already said that it's the Democrats that have been focused on this democracy issue. So let me take, for example, we were talking about Destiny. Let's take him, but it could be any left. Let's take Rachel Maddow, right? Rachel Maddow says, Trump's a threat to democracy. Trump's a threat to democracy. Trump's a threat to democracy. And then something occurs in the Democratic Party, and you're like, whoa, that's not very democratic. And she goes, oh, please, I don't want to hear you talk about democracy. You supported January 6th. Well, I wasn't the one talking about the importance of democracy. That was you. This is what's occurring right now with the Democratic Party. They have installed a candidate that got almost no votes from their voters. Now, the core idea of democracy is a government that works for the people. That the people have a voice, and the government listens to that and tries to operate with the interest of the people at the forefront of their decisions. The way that plays out, there are different forms of democracy, but a direct democracy would be each person gets an equal vote. Oftentimes that's what we think of when we think of democracy, a direct democracy. There are other forms of democracy. You could have a democratic republic, etc., etc. Not really interested in the semantics of it. Now, oftentimes what happens is we learn these buzzwords and we say them, but we forget, why are we defending it? So when someone defends democracy or talks about the importance of democracy, why? What is it exactly that they're talking about? Let me give you another example. Fascism. Okay. Fascism's bad. Okay, but what are we really saying? Well, when people say something's fascist, most of the time what they're saying is it's sort of corruptly authoritarian. That's the problem. So you can look at it, they'll use violence and intimidation to silence opponents. So when you look at an organization like Antifa and you say, hey, it seems that you're using fascist tactics. And they say, no, we call ourselves anti-fascist. And you're like, right, but the problem we all have with fascism is sort of the tactics that they employ. That's the problem. That's what we're criticizing. And it doesn't matter if you call it fascism, or if you call it authoritarianism, or you call it political violence, whatever you want to call it, you're doing it and it's bad. You might say, no, our political violence we don't call fascism, we call something else. Yeah, well, whatever, that's bad. That's what we don't like about fascism, and that's what we don't like that you're doing right now. Same thing. It's the same with democracy. It's like, you call yourself Democrats, okay, good, 2 points. But what are we really saying? Why is democracy important? When they're shouting, you're going to end democracy, what are they saying? Well, they're saying that you will become an authoritarian that's not accountable to the people. That their vote will no longer matter. Now, have you heard anyone talk that you watch that's a streamer talk about people's vote not mattering? Have you ever heard someone saying that? Right, that's me. That's my entire argument of the current system we have. That it's ran by unelected bureaucrats, and so the average person's voice doesn't matter. Anti-democratic would be a way of saying that. Nonetheless, what the Democrats have done with their primary is, by very definition, anti-democratic. Because they did not give the voters of the party a voice. They didn't. Now, let's turn our hat around and steelman the position from the left. The rub, they're a private organization. They can pick delegates any way they want. It's within their rules that they could do this. It's not their fault that Joe Biden had a medical condition and had to drop out. And most people now want Joe Biden to be gone. So this isn't anti-democratic. Au contraire, my friend, it is anti-democratic. Let me explain the reasons why. First off, depending on who you ask, when Biden signed his letter declaring he's not going to run, I did see some polling that said the majority of Democrats wanted him out. I saw other people pushing polling that said the majority of Democrats wanted him to remain. So how do you know which poll was accurate? We had a vote. Are you saying that the results of a vote can be overturned if polling suggests that sentiments have changed? That seems odd. Could the same be true of the general election? If Biden wins and 2 years in, people realize he's shit, like happened, and polling suggests that they don't like him anymore and want someone different, does that mean we redo the election? Of course not. Now, there are legal ramifications to that, but also morally you would say, no, that's not how it works. So that's number one. So there is no proof that the majority of Democrats wanted Biden out. It's not provable. There are polls going both ways on it. Number two, the reason that the majority of Democrats may want him out, or at least a large swath of Democrats, is because people that control the narrative have been pushing the narrative to get him out. That's why. For example, Joe Biden's mental health didn't significantly decline on the day of the debate. He'd been like that for a long, long time. But the people in the media and the people surrounding Joe Biden lied to the American people. And as such, the majority of Democrats wanted Joe Biden to be the candidate. It wasn't until they came out and said, oh, Joe Biden's shit, that then there was a change in public perception. In other words, it was anti-democratic because they put their thumb on the scale, on one hand intentionally subverting the truth in order to let people believe that Joe Biden was something he wasn't, mentally competent, which is in its way subverting democracy. And then secondly, once that became evident that it was going to hurt them in the general election, they went the other direction. That's not democratic. In other words, let's say for a second that the presidential race is going to be between me and Kamala Harris. And let's say that you could see in a crystal ball. And if we were given equal amounts of opportunity, so we each had the exact same money to spend, we each had the exact same coverage on every platform, the algorithms were completely equal, and let's say you could see into a crystal ball, and I would beat Kamala Harris 80% to 20% in the national vote. Absolutely destroy her. Okay? But then you see what would happen in reality, which I have no name recognition, no money. I would get blown out. Because no one knows who I am. Why? Because money and influence and power and connections matter. And they're able to tip the scales in the direction that they want. That's the system that we have now. There are criticisms with that system, many of which I agree with. But is it democratic? Is that a hallmark of democracy? I said this in 2020. When everyone was ranting and raving about Dominion voting machines, which you absolutely had the right to do, what did I say? I'm more concerned if they didn't cheat. Why? Because if they could drag a doddering old man with cognitive issues, who didn't even campaign the last 3 months of the election, across the finish line, who can't they drag? Basically, it's only going to get worse as technology increases, as algorithms become more important, as AI becomes more important. If Google could basically pick our president now, what's going to happen in the next 12 years? That's scarier to me than illegals' ballots being stuffed. That's not democratic. Superdelegates being able to pick your candidate, that's not democratic. It's not. The Democratic Party lied to their voters about Joe Biden's health for 4 years. They didn't give a shit. Then they lied to them and said, oh, we just found out. And they put pressure to get Joe Biden to quit. That's why Joe Biden's quitting. Not because he wanted to, but because he was forced out by powerful people. That's not democracy. Now, one more argument that they'll try to make. Well, but what if someone has a health condition? Shouldn't they go out? Or I saw Sitch making this argument. Oh, Republicans said that he's not competent enough to be president. And now that he's withdrawn, they say it's a coup. Well, that argument might hold up if they remove Joe Biden from the presidency. But that's not what they did. No one's called for that. If their argument was, oh shit, now we see this guy's not competent to be president, we're declaring he's unfit based on the 25th Amendment, that's different. Yes, when he's removed from office, then you obviously have to have a process to pick the next nominee. Totally makes sense. That's not what's occurred. Even if Joe Biden ends up resigning the presidency, that's not what occurred at the time that he declared that he wasn't running. He was forced out. That's what happened. Yes, it's true that Republicans said that they didn't want Joe Biden to run and be president because he's incompetent. The Democrats haven't capitulated to that. The Democrats said, okay, he can't win, so he shouldn't run, but he should still be president for the next 6 months. That's not democratic. The will of the voters of the Democratic Party do not matter. They don't matter. What matters is the donor class, the powerful people in the party who literally are picking and choosing who they want as the candidate. And by the way, that's what they did in 2016 and arguably in 2020 as well. In addition to that, the Democrats basically, when you brought up sort of that RFK got screwed over in the Democratic primary, and it was basically just a coronation for Joe Biden, the argument that they almost all made was, hey man, that's his right as the incumbent. That's how it works, man. If you're the incumbent president and you want to run again, there's basically no primary. That's always the way it works. And yet, while they made that argument, we all know that Joe Biden was not mentally competent to be president. Just like he's not now. And the Democrats knew it. They absolutely knew it. Kamala Harris knew it. Nancy Pelosi knew it. The media knew it. And they lied. And so that means that they basically acquiesced to a system to disenfranchise the voters of the Democratic Party by not telling them the truth that they knew that Joe Biden's mental health had declined to the point where if it became public, the public would say, no, we don't want this man. And they kept it hidden. And then they basically destroyed the primary process, ensuring that Joe Biden would be the nominee. And now they've said, now Joe Biden, you got to go. We'll pick the nominee. And so you end up, seemingly it's going to be Kamala Harris, someone who couldn't even get one delegate to vote for her in the 2020 presidential primary. She doesn't have one vote for her. Completely installed by the system. Completely. Not one Democrat voter voting for her to be the nominee. Not one. Well, Sam, if he wants my help, I'm willing to help. I reached out, but that's why it's anti-democratic. And when the response is, but you don't think January 6th was an attack on democracy, that's irrelevant. You're the people that said that democracy is so important. That's your argument. You don't give a shit about democracy. Similarly, it took all of 20 minutes for them to go to age doesn't matter. I don't see evidence of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. It's not that important. Who cares anyways? His team's what's important. It took 20 minutes for Joe Biden to drop out and them to say, oh, Trump's too old. Trump's too old. They don't give a shit about the Trump's too old argument. But what they'll say is, but Rob, isn't that you doing the exact same thing? Just like you said, we didn't really care about democracy because we harped on it. And then when we did something that was seen as anti-democratic, that proves we didn't care about democracy. Doesn't that prove, Rob, when you said Joe Biden was old? Okay, now he's out and Trump's the old man, and the fact that you don't care about it, doesn't that prove hypocrisy? No, because the criticism of Joe Biden was never just his age. That was the straw man that the Democrats tried to make it about. Remember when you would say, oh, I said it, they covered up Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And the response I would get is, but here's a New York Times article for 2020 asking, is Joe Biden too old? Those aren't the same things. Yes, there are general questions about the age of candidates that get in to be septuagenarians. That's certainly a general criticism. The criticism of Joe Biden wasn't a 70-something-year-old man's not capable. It was, he's not capable. He has something going on. He has a medical issue. Not just, he's old. That was never the criticism. That was the straw man that Democrats tried to make it about. People made fun of Trump's RNC speech because it was too long. Because a few days after an assassination attempt where his ear was shot, the guy had so much energy he couldn't shut the fuck up. That's the direct opposite of Joe Biden. Then I saw Counterpoint said to someone, someone was like, what about Biden's mental decline? He said, do you think Trump has any signs of cognitive decline? Another disingenuous framing of the question of what's going on. Quite literally, is Trump showing signs of cognitive decline? Probably, yes. I'm showing signs of cognitive decline. Anyone over the age of 40, for example, one of the hobbies that I have is watching chess. I enjoy watching people play chess. This might shock you if you're not that familiar with chess, because you might say, well, it's not like gymnastics where clearly your body has a peak physical performance and then once you turn a certain age, you just start to lose it. The same's true of your mental abilities when it comes to chess. As players get older, and I'm not talking like 90, I'm talking like 40s, 50s, 60s, their ability significantly declines. Now, you could still hold a conversation with these people. They're not like Joe Biden. Well, yes, you could say their abilities in the game of chess have declined. All of us have slight cognitive declines. So the framing of the question is disingenuous because while it is technically true that anyone as they get older experience some form of cognitive decline, again, I go back to my baseball example. I play a little. I'm not very good. I'm ranked about 1,200. I go back to the baseball example. Let's say you have two batters playing for the same team, and both of them are all-stars. And then the next year, one of them, they were both batting .300. They both hit 30 home runs. Pretty good. Both all-stars. And then the next year, the first guy only bats .250 and hits 25 home runs. You'd say, did he have decline? Yeah, he had decline. Absolutely true. And then the other guy never takes an at-bat because he goes out and shits his pants and rolls in the fetal position. And when we would say, whoo, that guy can't be a Major League Baseball player, Connor's argument would be, but didn't that other guy have decline too? Didn't he have decline too? He used to hit 30 home runs. Now he only hit 25. So that's decline too. Can you admit that? Yeah, I guess. What does that have to do with what we're talking about? It's not that Joe Biden has a slight amount of mental decline. It is that it's been evident since 2020 that he wasn't the politician he was in 2016 and had significant problems, which is why he was being hidden. And that's became worse as the years have gone on. To the point where the dude just announced via a fucking tweet on X that he's not running, even though was the presumptive nominee. He can't give a speech. He's teleprompters everywhere. The Wall Street Journal just put out an article today that said, way back in October of 2021, he was meeting with like a bunch of Democrat cabinet and things went off the rail then. In October of 2021, and they were like, what the fuck? In October of 2021, all of them knew it. They all knew So the argument, like, yeah, but do you think Trump's the exact same guy as he was in 2016? No. But he's not a vegetable. 2024 Trump is leagues cognitively ahead of 2020 Biden. Now, you might say, but I think Trump's an unhinged maniac and this, that. That's fine. Those are criticisms that you could have made 2016, 2020, and 2024. Those are questions of his temperament, of his honesty. Those are fine. We could talk about that stuff. But that's not his cognitive abilities. Thanks, David. I appreciate it. Matt C. says, you want to be consistent, they want to win. Explain to them why it's preferable to be consistent and lose more often. Well, that's a tough sell. Is it? That's a good question. For me, it is. Because I'm not going to let... I understand there's more important things in life, like my family, things that I could... like I'm a fat fuck. I need to lose weight. That's something I could work on. I should read more. I should be a better husband. I should be a better father. I need to do more work around the house. These are all real tangible shit that I need to work on, and I'll never be perfect at it. I'll always need to work more. Always. Is it worth sacrificing my integrity for a short-term victory? I don't think so. Especially when you look at it in the scale of, like, what exactly are we doing? Like, again, not to harp on it, but go back to Pisco. Now, I know this is going to be disagreeable to a lot of my audience. I like Pisco. I enjoy talking to Pisco. He's one of my two favorite people to debate because you could delve into these details, and I like that. I think he's a partisan hack. I've told him to his fucking face. Like, I think that he has gaslit himself so much that his core philosophical and political belief is that Orange Man bad. And as such, even if he's someone who, for example, would be a defense attorney that really speaks up for the rights of the defendant, he will eschew all of that to go after Donald Trump because the ends always justify the means, and Donald Trump is the ultimate end that we need to go after no matter what. That's what I believe about Pisco. But he's not dumb. He's a capable arguer. He gets into these details in a way that I enjoy debating him with, and I certainly don't wish him ill. Now, he does unethical shit as well, like the way that he tweets is fucking garbage, but we could get into that another day. Nonetheless, that's how I feel about Pisco. I don't wish him ill. I still sort of like him. Like, that's it. I don't care. His channel blow up. I don't give a fuck. Fine. Great by me. Don't care. Right? That's how I feel about him. Right? Pisco makes this Jamaal Bowman argument. Now, the stakes on Jamaal Bowman are nothing. The reason that I even talked to him about Jamaal Bowman was that one of the ridiculous charges that a bunch of the January 6 people were getting were obstruction of an official proceeding. And that was raising it to a felony level crime. And this is what was the narrative was being put out, that it was like sort of an insurrection. So, for example, when I say, well, May 31st, 2020 was an insurrection. If we're going to consider January 6th an insurrection, May 31st was an insurrection. Why? We had a bunch of violent left-wingers. Unlike January 6th, they brought lethal weapons and deployed them in the form of Molotov cocktails, attempting to break into the White House to physically get at the people inside the White House, including Donald Trump. That was serious enough that Secret Service had to remove Donald Trump from the White House into a secure bunker. That happened. And one of the reasons that I'm constantly deflected as to why the left and the Democrats don't give a shit about that, they'll say, but what was the official proceeding that they were interrupting? That's not an insurrection unless there is an official proceeding. That's what you need, an official proceeding that they were interrupting. Which is fucking stupid. It's nonsensical. So you're telling me it wouldn't be an insurrection to have a mob break into the White House and kill the president? That wouldn't be an insurrection? Of course it would. That's stupid. Oh, but Rob, he was sleeping. He wasn't signing legislation, so no problem. What? Ridiculous. Stupid. But that's the argument. What was the official proceeding? And so, of course, people say, well, who was charged with insurrection? Who was charged with insurrection on January 6th? I didn't see it. Well, it was the obstructing an official proceeding. That's what was so bad. Okay. Well, and we have an example where it looks like a prominent Democrat in office obstructed an official proceeding. They're trying to vote on this budget. Democrats are mad. They want more time. They're using all sorts of tactics to delay. None of it's working. Jamaal Bowman pulls a fire alarm. Looks pretty good chance that was done to delay. Delay an official proceeding, cut and dry, if that's what he did. That's the only reason that I ever talked to Pisco about this. Because Pisco believes every single person that's been charged with January 6th deserves it. That's his belief. It's this super serious, violent insurrection to overthrow the country. Trump should never be allowed to be on the ballot again because of this. Okay? So, now we see a Democrat seemingly obstructing official proceeding. And of course, me and Pisco have the discussion, and I'm laughing at him because he's like, oh no, I don't think he tried to delay. I think he was trying to get out the door. Haha, we're laughing. Debate ends. Whatever. Then, some weeks later, he re-brings it up on X. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Rob says that he misrepresents what I said. It's not worth getting into the details. Humorously, the day after he starts back up on me, I didn't bring it up to him. He started back up on me. Humorously, the next day, the video gets released of Bowman, where it's evident that he didn't try, after he pulled the alarm, he didn't try to go out the door. It was bullshit. He still says that's still the most likely scenario. He tried to go out the door. Why would he say that? Who gives a shit? Jake Lesba for $5, thanks so much, says Destiny's less of a partisan act than Pisco is, and Destiny's pretty bad. Yeah, that's probably true. But what are the stakes? Because I'm arguing, well, there's a two-tiered system. When it comes to Joe Schmo, January 6th grandma, blue-haired grandma holding a flag, throw the book at her, obstruct an official proceeding. But when it's a Democrat politician, don't do that. Here's a $1,000 fine. Why? Here's Pisco's answer. You ready? I don't know. It looks bad. But let's be honest. It's nowhere near the level of what January 6th. But yeah, you're right. Maybe this dude should have been charged with more. And maybe because he's a congressman, he got special treatment. I don't think that proves your argument that these institutions are corrupt and somehow engaged in this massive cover-up of wanting to go after Trump and his supporters, but letting anyone off the hook. I don't think that's what occurred. That's it. That's all he had to say. I would have been like, I disagree. But he wouldn't have embarrassed himself. Simple. No problem. What's worse, though, than the video was when the transcript of his conversation with the law enforcement officer revealed that he had said, I didn't intend for the alarm to go off. And Pisco had publicly said that that was beyond the pale, that of course he intended it. And Pisco also argued quite frequently to me that lying to law enforcement is a serious charge and needs to be prosecuted. So that's cut and dry. Zen's Forehead for $4.99, best super chat of the night, says send some super chats. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate all of you. So that's it. Cut and dry. No problem. He lied to law enforcement. And no one gets this. I don't know how many times I've talked about this in front of other left-wingers, and they either pretend to not get it, or they're so fucking dumb they don't get it. I'm no longer arguing, I don't give a fuck about Jamaal Bowman. I'm done. There's other double standards that are more blatant, that are more ridiculous. The reason I bring it up to Pisco is because his defense of that point, that was meaningless, that he could have just been like, I don't give a shit about Jamaal Bowman. Yeah, maybe he should have been charged. His defense was, well, when Jamaal Bowman said, I didn't intend for the alarm to go off, what he really meant was, I did intend for the alarm to go off, but I didn't know that the whole alarm would go off, just the one above me. The question that the law enforcement officer asked him was, did you intend for an alarm to go off? He says no. Pisco says, oh, that's not a lie, because what he really meant was yes. Now, when I had this debate in front of Andrew Wilson with him, Pisco's only defense was to say, but why would I lie? Right! Matt C. for $10 says, thank you so much, man. You say you're arguing with a Dem lawyer and wondering why they always defend their client, the Dems. I get you. But why? Why sacrifice your integrity for that? For that? For nothing. A nothing argument. Todd Sullivan for $5. Thank you so much, man. Sends a sticker. Now, why do I harp on that? One, because I like talking to Pisco, and it fucking sucks to see how self-evidently bad faith he is. But secondly, because it's representative of what we see. Why just bullshit about this stuff? Because the question that got me on this was, well, why is it more important to be consistent and have integrity than try to get wins? I'm open to hearing. I'm still not going to do it, but I'm open to hear people say, like, if we had a crystal ball, and Rob, if you would just say, all you got to say is Trump never did anything wrong. Everything he did's great. And that will cause Trump to win the election. And then the country's going to go in a way better spot. All of a sudden, all these conflicts around the world will stop. And inflation's going to go down. And the border's going to be secure. Would you do it? Probably. That's difficult, right? That's difficult. If you really knew that you told this little lie, and all of a sudden everything would... But the truth is, there ain't shit all I'm going to say that's going to have that sort of effect. Commonwealth, $5. Thank you so much. Says, found your channel after Andrew and the Crucible recommended today. What an awesome channel, man. Looking forward to digging into your vids. God bless. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Andrew's one of my favorite people. Love the Crucible. Love Andrew. Fantastic debater as well. I'm leaning towards thinking Pisco believes what he's saying, that he has gaslit himself into thinking Trump's so evil that subconsciously he starts believing a lot of this shit. Now that Bowman thing, I think he knows is full of shit, but... And it's something I say all the time. I understand people sell out. What shocks me is how little they do it for. That's what shocks me. Like, I did this interview with this guy, Non-Smoker, yesterday. It was a fun interview. You should go check it out. I had a lot of fun doing it. And we talked about Progressive Victory PAC and how it pays a lot of streamers on Twitch and, ethics behind that. And I mentioned in that, like, listen, hey man, if some group wants to pay you, by all means, take the money. I think you ought to question whether or not you should you should lie to get that money. So, like, if I'm a Trump supporter, and all of a sudden Progressive Victory PAC calls me and says, hey, we saw your debate with Destiny. We're afraid that you're really good at this. We'll pay you $1 million if you just stop debating. Just make your channel about fucking baseball until the election's over. I'm sorry to tell you I'd probably take that money. I probably would. But I don't know that I would take $1 million to advocate for Biden or to advocate for the Democrats. To me, there's an ethical difference between, okay, I'll just stop talking, or I'm going to intentionally lie. Thank you, Vita, $5. Keep up the great job, Rob. Hey, rhymes. I hope to see you take on Destiny soon and give him another usual L. I'd love to. But maybe. Do I have a price? I don't know, man. It's something that, I'm constantly worried that I won't live up to my own expectations. Or more importantly, the expectations of my family. Constantly. Like, completely outside the scope of politics. Here's a conversation I've had with my wife several times, and she probably hates it. I've never cheated on my wife. I haven't even been close to cheating on my wife. I love my wife. That's it. Period. Anyone who knows me would say, yeah, we've never remotely seen a situation where Rob was even hitting on someone or flirting. It just doesn't happen. But can I say that would never happen? I don't know. Who will I be in 10 years? I don't know. I'd like to say, of course, I'll be a great man. But most people think that. Thank you, Jake. Jake Lesba. For another $1.99, says, thanks for having a spine, unlike Connor. I have no problem. So I don't know. I'm not saying, I'm leaving wiggle room for myself. No, I don't want to cheat. I don't. I have no interest. I'm not close. But I don't know where I'll be 10 years from now. So similarly, I'd like to tell you I'll never sell out for money. But is it true? I don't know. Let's say I lose my job. And then all of a sudden I lose my house to the bank. And my wife and son and me are struggling. And someone comes along and is like, here's $5 million to knock on doors for the Democrats. I might take that money. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just being honest with people. I don't know how to evaluate that. It's like, maybe. And so I understand the concept of selling out. What shocks me is how little people do it for. There are people that would fucking sell out for like 10 subscribers. It blows my mind. Thanks, Matsy. I appreciate it. Yeah, if you guys just send me $5 million, then you don't have to worry about me selling out. Good point. I just don't know, though. I don't. You know, I had this conversation on X the other day where I was going back and forth with a bunch of... Because I said, listen, I don't agree with what Destiny's saying, but the overarching point that he's making, that there are hypocrites, is true. There are people on the conservative side that make fun of people for dying that are on the perceived left-wing side, or make fun of attacks, like when Paul Pelosi got attacked. Now, it's different, as I admit in my post, but the general theme of it's true. If we're going to say it's unethical to pick on innocent people that get attacked, that should be across the board. If you're clutching your pearls and then someone dives into your post history and it turns out you were making fun of attacks on Democrats, maybe you shouldn't be the person making that message. Vita, thank you so much for $5. Says, I think Destiny put the stipulation at least 100K subs specifically for me, so you wouldn't have to debate me. Could very well be true. We'll see. I'll debate him. I'm not going to step on Andrew's toes, so we'll leave Andrew debate him first, but I'll do it. And if he says no, he says no. I'll say this. I frequently send DMs to Destiny and offer to talk about things. So, but is what it is. Anyways, in this X post, someone said, that's because, Rob, they cheer for demons and we cheer for saints. And so it's okay to have a double standard. And I responded, I want that to be true, but I can't do it. I still have to try to be consistent. And then everyone started fucking with me. Oh, you want it to be true that we cheer for demons. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying is this. Let's take someone that we could all agree is a bad person, like John Wayne Gacy, a serial killer that killed young boys. Right? We all agree, for the sake of argument, there might be some fucked up lefty out there that doesn't agree, but that this is an evil person, right? Okay. Can I forego my principles to deal with that person? I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know. I want to say, sure, fuck it. That's what I want to say. But then I know if I say yes, then there'll be someone who's bad, but not quite as bad as Gacy. And I'll say okay to him too. And then there'll be someone who's not quite that bad. And then at some point, I'm going to have to say, okay, if I say it's okay to forgo principles for people that I find evil, doesn't that mean that other people will do the same thing? And I know many of them think I'm evil. Is that the world I want to live in? Where we say, hey, as long as I could make the subjective case, then I'm allowed to operate outside the scope of the principles that I say that the world should operate under. And then it gets back to the question of political violence. Why am I against political violence? Well, one of the most sound reasons why is because once you say, okay, there are times when it's necessary, everyone says, yes, this time, right now. My issue, what I'm complaining about right now is the most important thing. So now I'm justified. I'm not Destiny. That's what he believes. That's not what I believe. I'm trying to be consistent. But it's difficult. It really is. I'll give you another example. Israel-Palestine. Can I say objectively? To me, it seems from an objective standpoint or standing outside standpoint that doesn't really give a shit about Israel or Palestine in the sense that we shouldn't be involved. I give a shit about people all over the world, but as far as what we should be doing as a government, I don't think we should be involved. I think Israel probably went too far at points. Probably did. I think they were probably better served to get better intelligence to find out where the leaders of Hamas were and directly attack them. Seems like they're probably in places like Qatar. Maybe that's what they should have been doing. But I understand the argument that outside of it, if we're not involved, we could say, hey, is this too much? But I also understand if it was my family that was killed on October 7th, I'd say, fuck all that. You killed my family. Now it's different. Does that mean it's morally more righteous? Probably not. But you're full of shit if you can't admit that that's how it would be. That's just the truth. When it's you, when it's your family, it's going to be different. So what do we do with that? Well, you can't. You still have to have objective standards. You know, this is... I shouldn't even talk about this. There's a guy by the name of Gary Planche. And there's a famous video. I can't really talk much about this, but his child was assaulted in the most heinous of ways by a gentleman. And he, I'll just say, took matters into his own hand. You understand it. But should it be allowed in our legal system? Probably not. Because then, who's to say where that leads? Well, I felt justified because my daughter was hurt. Yeah, well, you got the wrong guy. Oh, shit. Or actually, she wasn't really hurt. She just told you that story and it wasn't true. Like, for example, Tawana Brawley, right? Who was this big case in, I believe it was in New York, Crown Heights, if I'm not mistaken, was this black girl who claimed that she was assaulted by police officers. And they wrote the N-word on her and, like, brutally assaulted her. And it was a huge thing. This was like one of Al Sharpton's first things. And there were all these like protests and riots and this crazy shit. And then she later admitted she made it all up because she was afraid of her stepdad. Because she was out past when she was supposed to be home. So she made up this bullshit story. What if that stepdad took matters into his own hands? You'd say at the time, well, maybe he's justified if these adults did this to his daughter. But then you could quickly see how that quickly goes awry. She lied. Whoops. You know, so you understand it. You understand, like, from a father's perspective, of course. But you also understand why the laws can't just let you do that. You can't, you know. The point is, if you're honest, there are difficult philosophical, you know, moral questions that you have to say. Where are my standards? When can I forego them? And there are arguments as to why. But I try to remain consistent. I really do. I'm not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've never made fun of someone dying. I probably have. What I can tell you is it's exceedingly rare. And I actually feel terrible because I always try to remember, even if it's someone that I think's a really terrible person, if they die, they probably had a loved one that cared about them. And you think about that, you know, I'm not trying to get sappy or anything. I'm just saying, like, that's the perspective that I'm coming from. And it's difficult. It's very difficult to hold yourself to a standard. It really is. But I think you see what happens. Go to Destiny's channel. Go watch Destiny a day or two after the assassination attempt. That's what happens. When you justify your... Well, the other side did it, so I could do it too, and this is what's going to happen. I'm going to say this, and it's just bad. You made fun of Paul Pelosi, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. That's what ends up spewing out of your mouth. Because you took some political L's, and you think that the other side's so evil that you're justified. Okay. Maybe you're right to a point. Maybe the other side is shit. You should strive to be better. The counter argument is, well, Destiny's probably streaming right now with 12,000 people watching, and I'm streaming with 80. So who's right? It's a persuasive argument. Sometimes you win more. I say it all the time. My biggest strength is my biggest weakness. That I'm honest. That I'm not a grifter. 100 years from now, when we're all dead and buried, that'll be my biggest strength. That I could look myself in the mirror. That I could look my family in the mirror and say, I tried. I might be wrong. I fail. But ultimately, I tried to live up to a standard. I tried. And I fail every day. I know that. But at least I tried. And all the political arguments I have, they ain't even going to matter 2 weeks from now, let alone 100 years from now. So would it have been worth it to sell out? But it is a weakness. It really is. It's a fucking weakness to know that you have to limit yourself by having sort of a set of standards, that you can't just blatantly lie. Makes it more difficult, but I think that you'll be, my recommendation is that people try to be authentic and honest, because I think it pays off in the end in many ways. So, now, having said that, I don't dislike Destiny. I wish him well. I think that he was on tilt. I don't think, I did a whole fucking series of videos about this, so I don't want to talk about it again, but my personal feelings are that he wasn't calling for violence against anyone, and that's my bright line. That's where I draw the line. So if he's just making shitty, edgy jokes, fuck him. The jokes were shitty. I'll tell that to his face. But I don't think it's unforgivable. Like, if he's literally calling for violence against people. That would be beyond the pale. But I understand people that disagree with me. Who knows? Who knows what the truth is? Yeah, I'll be doing a 24-hour stream before the election. Probably a couple weeks before the election. And traditionally in 2020 and 2022, I was able to get some Congress people on and some actual people involved in the Republican Party here in Pennsylvania. I still got a couple connections that I could pull once a year or something like that. So hopefully that's something that people would be interested in, and we'll line up some guests. I'll bring on some lefties. We'll do some 3 a.m. debating fucking weird lefties and smacking them around. It'll be fun. So yeah, that's always a fun little thing. But yeah. So hopefully I explained the democracy thing. I didn't talk much about it, but the whole age thing, I think I referenced that too, that they're just pivoting immediately. And what's funny is they know they're full of shit. They know. Like, so for example, if you go to like Pisco or Pondering Politics X feed right now, it's like they'll put like the little Snoopy emoji or the smiley face emoji. Trump's too old, smiley face. Because they know what they're doing. They do that shit all the time. They know they're just being disingenuous pricks, which is fine. And they're not calling out our absurdity, because the implication of it, like if I could steelman their position, they would say, well, okay, we're being tongue-in-cheek, but that's just because it was absurd how you went after Biden for his age. That would be the argument. Because if they have to make some sort of argument, right? So that's going to be the argument. But it wasn't absurd that we went after Biden because it wasn't for his age. We went after Biden because his obvious cognitive decline, which you all gaslit people about for 4 fucking years. Oh, he's talking about Act 77. I know a little about Act 77. I've talked about it a little, but and one thing I think that Destiny and Pisco do well is that they research this stuff heavily, and then they're able to most people don't look at it at all, and then they're able to spin this into this horrible, worst thing ever. But these are legal cases. Again, imagine it went the other way. Imagine that, Pennsylvania, for example, immediately decides, yeah, by the way, mail-in ballots are illegal. That's it. Bam. Trump wins. Send the electors. Trump wins Pennsylvania. Imagine what they would have said. They'd have been like, this is fucking outrageous. We need an appeals court to look at it. Sorry. The electors had to be in by a certain date. Sorry. Too bad. They would have been livid. They would have. They'd have said, that's fucking outrageous. They would have said, what do we have to do to delay this? Alternate elector? Fine. Fuck it. Send them. That's what they would have said. Till the Supreme Court could look at it. Right. And I would have said, well, I don't think that's criminal. Yeah, I'm planning on working with John Ward a lot here, actually, coming up. I've been in talks with them. And so, actually, a gentleman reached out to me. Where is he? I gotta see. Where did he reach me? Shit. Did he send me a text? It's all like X or Discord or... I could have swore. I gotta look for this. Someone sent me something and was like, hey, there it is. Shit, I didn't accept it. Jack Kentner. Thursday. Sorry, I know this isn't fun. I'm trying to respond to this guy. But Jack works with John Ward, and I think I'm going to be streaming with him this week. Yep, Destiny just said if the alternate slates were legit, if they found fraud before January 6th. Yeah. So. But yeah, I'll get John Ward on soon. John's doing some really good things here in Pennsylvania. And I hope to help him out, if only a little bit, but do my best to sort of help him out. And I think it'll be I like John a lot. I think it'll be a good partnership. So, yeah, I'm glad that people know of John here in my chat, and hopefully you all like him. Anything else people wanted to talk about before I let you go this evening? I'm not sure that I'll be streaming tomorrow. It's just how it breaks down. You never know. What do I think of Rathbone? He seems to be everywhere right now. I have no idea who that is. So not everywhere. I haven't seen him. Don't know Rathbone. So if both sides were calling for Cheadle's resignation, do you think someone should bring up impeachment against her? Yeah, someone already said that they're filing articles of impeachment. She will be removed. I would imagine she'll resign. She doesn't realize yet that she's going to have to fall on the sword, but she will. Anything else? Well, I appreciate all of you. Thank you especially to the people that donated money. I'll take your money so I don't have to sell out in the future. No, I do appreciate it. I really do. Could always use the money for a litany of things. I lean big tent Republican because my issue is not the same as everyone else's issues. I understand being pissed off if you're like a Christian conservative, that it sucks to have people that were at OnlyFans or, gay or whatever in your party. I get that. My issue is corruption. I want people that are willing to stand with me to fight against corruption. I don't give a shit if they're gay. I don't care if they're skin color. I don't care their religion. I don't give a shit. If they will stand with me on that issue, I'm not certain that, in fact, I'm very uncertain that Donald Trump will actually do anything significant if he wins against that corruption, but at least it's a chance. I think that the corruption is so vast that we basically need all hands on deck in order to fight it. But if my big issue was Christian conservatism first and foremost, then yeah, I might say, what good is a victory if we have to change our principles in order to achieve it? So I understand the argument totally. I really do. But for my purposes, I think that I could live my life as a Christian, but we need to fight back against this corruption. Not change, but we don't have some. Yeah, I agree. I think that you do have to accept people. You don't necessarily change your, like, if you're 100% pro-life, life begins at conception, it's difficult. I don't think that's a winning political position, but how can I advocate to you to change your heartfelt belief that we should stop the murder of children? Because that's what you believe, it's a child at the moment of conception. Hey, it's worth murdering some kids to win an election. It's not a persuasive argument, nor should it be. So I understand. I mean, the argument would go something like, is it worth saving this country if it requires me acquiescing to the murder of children? Good question. I don't fall in that exact camp. I think that we should vastly limit abortions, but I think that there is a point, like the morning after pill, of which I would be willing to accept. Not lightly, but it's difficult. So how could a Christian conservative accept me on their side? Tough question. Thanks, Contemporary Compendium. I appreciate it. I like the videos you do too, man. Thanks for doing those. Sometimes I retweet them out. So, special thanks to my editor, Black Elk, who's been doing a fantastic job. Go to YouTube around noon every day. I put up another video that he edited. So, most of it's just segments from my live stream, but he's doing great work in the edits, thumbnails, all of that stuff. He's doing a fantastic job. So, special shout out to Black Elk. Absolutely wonderful work. He's a really great guy, and he offered to help me out with this. So, check him out. Check out his X channel. It's just the Black Elk. Let me post that. Now, lately on this crappy computer here, it's been blowing up anytime I try to open two things at once. Here's his channel. It's Black Elk House. Yeah, he's crushing it. He's doing great. Great guy. Plus, he'll probably watch this later, so I have to say something nice about him. But no, special thanks to him. Thanks to my wife and everyone that helps me at the channel that way. You all are the best. I really appreciate it. Sorry that I'm not able to stream more. I wish I was able to. But I'm trying my best. I'm trying to be more consistent here with when I can, at least going into the election season. Maybe I'll take a little break after the election, but I anticipate that it'll be getting more and more frequent as the election starts to get a little closer here. So, yeah, look forward to doing these debates and stuff with these hyperbolic maniacs that whine and cry when they lose a court case or whatever, and then decide that they need to make jokes or questionably call for bad things to happen to Trump supporters. They're all insurrections, blah, 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 blah. Look forward to crushing those people in debates more going forward. So even if they have bigger channels than me, even if all their dumb audience thinks that they're crushing me, I don't care. We all know the truth. We know that's not happening. They know I'm the best that they deal with. I know that I'm the best they deal with. And I'm hoping that Andrew smacks Destiny around here in a couple nights on this debate. But maybe I'll be moderating that debate, and so as always, my goal as a moderator is to be as seen and heard as little as possible and to be as fair as humanly possible. So if I was to moderate, who I want to win is irrelevant. Hopefully no one will know based on my... So, all right, thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk to you all soon. As always, have a good one.